Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a world where comfort barely exists, and where even your first breath of the morning feels like work. You wake up, not in your soft bed, not under a cozy blanket, but on something that honestly feels like a wooden regret. And don't worry, you probably won't survive this, but you'll at least get a good story out of it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And also comment your location and your local time. It's always satisfying to see from where are you tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink awake to a thin slice of dawn light leaking through gaps in a mud brick wall. There's no alarm clock, no phone buzzing, just the sound of animals shifting outside and someone not gently stoking a fire. Your body aches in the familiar way it always does, like the world pressed its full weight on you overnight and forgot to lift it off in the morning. You stretch, but the stretch doesn't help. Ancient life doesn't really do rested. You sit up, brushing dust off your arms. Dust clings to everyone here. It's basically a fashion choice forced on you by nature. Even the air tastes a bit like yesterday's dirt. You shuffle toward the doorway, ducking under a wooden beam that always looks like it's about to collapse. Historians still argue whether these early home structures were brilliantly resilient or just one strong sneeze away from disaster. As you step outside, the cool morning air hits your face briefly before the heat begins creeping in. The sun here doesn't slowly rise. It attacks. Already, you feel sweat forming, reminding you that laundering clothes is a luxury you absolutely do not have the time or water for. A mainstream historical fact. Ancient people commonly woke up at dawn, not because they were super disciplined, but because daylight was the only reliable working hour, and open flames were precious and expensive to burn after sunset. Someone hands you a simple task: fetch water, check the animals, gather firewood. And it's funny how those tasks sound peaceful when you imagine them, but when you live them, they feel like the opening chapter of a survival game with no tutorial. You trudge toward a small water source nearby, and it's not the kind of serene river you'd paint on a postcard. The water is murky, filled with tiny floaters you try to pretend are just harmless bits of plant life. Spoiler, they're not. But this is what people drank, cooked with, washed in, and occasionally prayed over. And somehow, it kept them going. As you scoop the water with a clay pot that has a crack you're pretending not to see, you catch yourself thinking how unbelievably fragile everything feels. One drop too many on the wrong corner, and the pot becomes a puzzle. One slip of your foot on a rock, and suddenly you're dealing with an injury no one in this time has the tools to fix. Someone nearby coughs. A sharp, deep cough that echoes across the morning like a warning. You don't need a doctor to tell you that coughs here are rarely innocent. Stepping back toward your home, you hear a rooster scream its opinionated thoughts at the universe. Animals here don't exist for cuteness. They exist for work, for alarm systems, and for occasionally being the difference between whether you eat or go hungry. A quirky historical tidbit. In some ancient communities, chickens were believed to sense supernatural disturbances, so if one crowed oddly at night, people sometimes took it as a cosmic warning rather than just poultry anxiety. Your home smells like smoke, now sharp, earthy, and unavoidable. Someone's cooking a morning meal, which is generous wording. It's more like heating up something that resembles warm grain mush with the enthusiasm level of cardboard. You sit with others, the group quiet except for the scraping of wooden spoons against clay bowls. Conversation this early is a luxury. Survival is the priority. You eat quickly, partly because you're hungry, partly because bugs tend to get interested if you take too long. You swat one away and silently accept that this is just your life. After finishing, you step outside again. The sun, fully risen now. Light spills across the settlement, exposing every flaw. The uneven walls, the patched roofs, the cracked pottery, the tired faces. There's beauty here, but it's not the kind that relaxes you. It's the kind that reminds you that humans have always clawed their way through existence, one difficult sunrise at a time. You notice a child chasing a goat, laughing loudly, barefoot on hard ground. You wince instinctively. Every stick, every rock, every thorn is a potential medical emergency. But the kid runs like the world can't hurt him, which is another reminder that children in ancient civilizations learned early, often brutally early, that danger was simply part of life. And you can't help but remember that crocodile dung sunscreen you encountered in that Egyptian side story some nights ago. People used whatever they could find, even if it was questionable, strange, or genuinely cursed. An elder walks past you, slow but steady, eyes sharp even after a lifetime of exhaustion. You nod respectfully. Longevity here is rare enough to be a badge of honor, and no one needs to say it, but everyone knows. Reaching old age is less about luck and more about successfully avoiding everything trying to kill you for decades. You take a moment to breathe, and the world around you hums with the same monotone rhythm. Survival, survival, survival. The distant sound of someone grinding grain, a pot cracking, a baby crying, a dog barking, warnings at something only it understands. It's chaotic, but oddly balanced, like the entire civilization is held together by habit, tradition, and a shared understanding that life is hard, but it has to go on. And standing there, you finally realize that waking up in this world isn't just about opening your eyes. It's about accepting that every day begins with hardship, and yet somehow, people manage to build entire cultures from that struggle. You start your day thinking maybe, just maybe, breakfast will save your mood. But ancient civilizations aren't exactly known for their culinary generosity. You walk toward the small fire pit where meals usually appear, and you can already guess the menu because, honestly, it hasn't changed since ever. If you're imagining variety, spices, or a warm loaf of something soft and fluffy, I admire your optimism. But no, you're getting grains today. You got grains yesterday. And unless the universe suddenly decides to bless you, you'll get grains tomorrow too. The pot over the fire burps out a sad bubble, and you stir it with a stick that probably shouldn't be used as a utensil. The mush inside looks a little like wet sand and tastes like someone whispered the idea of flavor at it from the other side of the village. A mainstream historical fact. In many ancient societies, especially early agrarian ones, most people consumed over half their daily calories from one staple grain: barley, wheat, millet, rice, whatever grew best nearby. That sounds stable until you realize it also meant monotony so deep it could put you to sleep mid-chew. You scoop a small portion into your bowl, but you're not done yet. You add exactly 3 things: hope, resignation, and maybe a stray pebble that somehow survived the grinding process. You pick it out with your fingers because dental care here is basically try not to break anything you can't fix. You take your first bite, and it's warm, filling, and aggressively boring. Your stomach doesn't cheer, but it sighs, which is the closest thing to gratitude it can manage. Around you, others eat too, quietly, because food scarcity has taught everyone a kind of respect. Even complaints stay in your mind, where they belong. A few people glance at the horizon like it might suddenly send a fruit, a fish, or literally anything with color. But deep down, you know that special foods only appear after rare hunts, long travels, or impossible luck. When a neighbor sits beside you with something slightly different, maybe a sliver of dried fish, or a handful of lentils, you stare longer than socially acceptable, silently negotiating with fate to let a tiny piece fall into your bowl. It doesn't. Fate is stingy today. It usually is. The truth hits you again. Food isn't comfort. It's survival. Every bite buys you a few more hours of strength, a little more endurance for whatever hard labor or unpredictable chaos waits for you today. Historians still argue whether early farmers were healthier than hunter-gatherers, but when your breakfast tastes like gritty, wet cardboard, you start thinking hunters might have had the better deal. You finish your bowl and scrape the inside with your fingers, because wasting food is unthinkable. Not in a preachy modern way, but in a literal, this could decide whether you faint before midday way. And as you get up, you feel the familiar famished after eating sensation that ancient meals were famous for. Full stomach, empty energy. It's almost impressive how food designed to sustain whole civilizations can still make you feel like you need a second breakfast that doesn't exist. Later in the day, you head toward the small storage area, a place that wishes it were a pantry, but is actually just a dark corner, filled with baskets, pots, and the faint smell of desperation. You check the supplies, counting the grains left, the tiny dried herbs someone gathered, and a single onion that has become the community treasure. People admire it like a monarch. No one dares cut it yet. It's for a special occasion, a festival, or maybe for when morale drops below sea level. You hear someone whispering a quirky historical tidbit while they stack baskets, In some ancient cultures, people believed that spirits lived inside grains and had to be treated with respect while harvesting. You look at your bowl of morning mush and think, if there is a spirit in there, it's probably tired, cranky, and begging to be transferred into something that tastes better. By midday, hunger creeps back, rude and uninvited. You try to ignore it because you know the next meal won't happen until evening. Daytime is for work, and food is for after you've earned it. Your body protests loudly, reminding you that you spent sunrise lifting, walking, carrying, grinding, but complaints don't change the rules. Hunger is ancient humanity's permanent roommate. While you work, you see a few people nibbling on random things they find outdoors. Berries of questionable identity, leaves that might be edible or might be a mistake, or insects that provide protein whether you admit it or not. You've never felt closer to nature, mostly because nature is constantly trying to climb into your mouth in the form of bugs that fly too close. As the sun moves, the heat becomes aggressive, stealing whatever hydration the morning gave you. You think about snacking on something, but snacks here are basically a philosophical concept. If you're unbelievably lucky, someone might hand you a piece of leftover bread, and by bread, I mean a dense, hard slab that could double as a weapon. You gnaw on it anyway, because calories are calories. Even ancient cheeses, when they appear, look suspicious, smell suspicious, and taste suspicious. But people eat them because survival doesn't allow pickiness. When evening finally arrives, dinner feels like a quiet celebration. You gather with others around the fire, watching the flames flick upward and dance in the breeze. Someone adds herbs to the pot, barely any, but enough to trick your brain into thinking flavor might exist tonight. A miracle. For a moment, the air smells like something comforting. You lean closer, letting that smell carry you to a place where meals feel warm, emotional, and more than fuel. The pot bubbles slowly, and when you taste the final dish, you actually pause. It's still simple, still rough, still ancient, but there's something soothing about it. The warm thickness, the faint herbiness, the sense that everyone around you is sharing the same experience with the same tired hope. For just a few minutes, food becomes connection. And as you eat, you can't help thinking about how modern life made meals an art form. Back here, they're a lifeline. Back here, taste is less important than survival. Back here, every grain, every scrap, every drop matters. You place your empty bowl beside you and let the fire warm your face. Your stomach isn't full, but it's quiet enough to let you work, walk, and breathe without complaint. And in ancient times, that's considered a victory. You lean back, exhaling softly, realizing that food might not bring joy here, but it brings just enough strength to face whatever tomorrow throws at you. You think water will be simple, humble, kind. But in ancient civilizations, water is a daily gamble, a silent threat wrapped in absolute necessity. When you step outside in the early light, pot in hand, you already know you're about to face one of the most unforgiving parts of ancient life. Food might be bland, work might be endless, but unsafe water? That's the thing that stalks you quietly, waiting for the smallest mistake. You walk toward the communal water source, your feet kicking up dust with every step. The air feels dry enough to drink, which is ironic, because you're on your way to drink something that probably shouldn't be drunk. You balance the clay pot carefully, trying not to think about the dozens of hands that have touched it, or the impossibly thin crack running down the side like a warning. A mainstream historical fact floats through your mind. In many ancient settlements, clean water wasn't clean at all. Even river civilizations, Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, China, dealt with contamination constantly because people bathed, washed clothes, cooked, dumped waste, watered animals, and performed rituals all in the same streams. Purity was spiritual, not microbial. If you ever wished for a time machine, this is the exact moment when you take that wish back. You arrive at the water source and crouch down, watching the surface ripple. You can see your reflection, but it's wavy and distorted, like the water itself is shrugging at you. The liquid looks mostly clear today, which is the ancient version of not actively trying to kill you. But you still notice floating bits, leaves, dust, maybe a bug doing the backstroke. Someone beside you dips their container in the water, swirls it, and drinks straight from it with confidence you definitely haven't earned yet. They nod at you casually, like this is nothing, and it is nothing for them. Their body has been negotiating with this water since birth. Your body, meanwhile, is writing a shaky resignation letter. You lean forward, dip your pot carefully, and the moment the water enters, the pot becomes heavy, too heavy. You remember, too late, the quirky historical tidbit you heard once. Some ancient communities believed that water spirits punished people who wasted or spilled water. You cling to the pot like the spirits themselves are judging your grip. The walk back is long, slow, and very, very sloshy. Your arms ache. You try not to spill a drop because every drop counts. Water here is currency, life, and a permanent stressor. Historians still argue whether ancient people suffered more from famine or from contaminated water, but as you feel the pot wobble in your hands, you're voting for water. Definitely water. Back home, the first thing you do is strain the water through a woven cloth, and by strain, you really just remove the bigger stuff. Anything tiny stays tiny. You boil it next, watching bubbles rise like tiny ghosts escaping. You cling to the idea that boiling fixes everything. In reality, boiling fixes some things, not all, but it's the closest thing to safety you have. Once the water cools, you take a sip. It's warm, earthy, and faintly smoky from the fire. It's not refreshing, not crisp. You don't sigh in satisfaction. You sip like someone trying to convince themselves that this is fine, everything is fine. Your stomach isn't screaming, your throat isn't suspicious, and nature isn't laughing at you. Hours later, while you work, the heat creeps in again. Sweat trickles down your back, coating your skin in dust. You feel the dry scratch inside your throat, reminding you that hydration isn't optional. You drink another gulp of the boiled water and hope it cooperates with your internal organs. A traveller passes through your settlement later in the day, carrying a leather flask that has clearly been refilled in dozens of unknown places. They offer you a sip, and you politely decline, mostly because you don't want to die, but also because you have trust issues with liquids now. They laugh gently, telling you a strange belief from another region. Some people thought illnesses came from angry air, not water. And for a moment, you envy that version of reality. Angry air feels easier to avoid. As the day heats further, you walk to help with irrigation canals, long trenches that carry water from distant rivers. They are lifelines for crops, but also perfect breeding grounds for insects that consider you a walking buffet. You slap your arm as a mosquito lands, thinking about how many ancient diseases rode through history on tiny wings. You watch the water move through the channel, slow and muddy, carrying silt that nourishes crops and microorganisms that shouldn't be anywhere near your digestive system. But this is the system. This is the world. People survive because they adapt, because they tolerate, because they learn to live with risks that modern life eliminated centuries later. Evening cools the air slightly, and you pour what remains of your morning water into a small cup, sipping it while sitting near the fire. Your stomach grumbles not angrily, just uncertainly. You wrap your arms around your knees, watching the flames flick upward, and you think about how water connects everything. Life, sickness, crops, rituals, fear. Someone sits beside you, handing you a piece of advice passed through generations. Drink slow, trust the fire, and always thank the water. You nod, not fully understanding but appreciating the wisdom anyway, and as darkness settles over the ancient world, you finally accept that this civilization doesn't try to comfort you, it trains you, shapes you, toughens you, even through something as simple and as terrifying as water. You step back inside your home as the light shifts toward late afternoon, and immediately you're reminded that home in ancient civilizations is less about comfort and more about endurance. You look around, taking in the rough walls, the uneven floor, and the ceiling beams that always look dangerously close to changing careers and becoming floor beams. These homes are built to survive the world, but living inside them is its own challenge. The air inside is warm and dense, holding onto heat like it collects it for a hobby. There's no insulation, no ventilation system humming gently in the background, just a room that does whatever the weather tells it to. And today, the weather is yelling. You run your fingers along the mud brick wall, feeling its texture crumbly in some spots, stubbornly solid in others. A mainstream historical fact floats through your mind. Many ancient homes, especially in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley, were built with sun-baked mud bricks that needed constant maintenance. They lasted, but only if you kept patching, smoothing, and praying they didn't melt during heavy rains. You sit on a low stool, if you can call it that. It's more like a lopsided wooden apology. You shift your weight, and it wobbles threateningly. Comfort wasn't a priority in ancient craftsmanship. Durability was. And while durable is great for surviving storms, it does nothing for your spine. You look around the room. There's one window, a small opening, really just big enough for light but small enough to keep out the worst of the dust. Although, to be honest, the dust doesn't really need invitations. It just lives here, permanently. You inhale gently, aware that most ancient people lived with smoke, ash, animal dander, and whatever pollen the wind dragged in. Historians still argue whether indoor air quality contributed more to chronic coughing, or whether outdoor pollution from fires, kilns, and workshops deserved the blame. A pot sits in one corner, cracked but still holding together because clay here isn't just pottery, it's life. Storage, cooking, carrying, all handled by the same hard-working material. You admire the skill required to make these objects, knowing full well you'd shatter one within 5 minutes if left alone with it. Someone walks in behind you, brushing past a hanging textile that tries and fails to block drafts. Cloth here isn't soft or cozy. It's functional, woven from fibers that make your skin itch if you look at them wrong. A quirky historical tidbit pops into your mind. In some ancient homes, walls were plastered with a mix of mud, straw, and even crushed shells, sometimes decorated with simple geometric patterns or handprints. People always wanted beauty, even when survival took most of their energy. As you move toward the cooking corner, you duck under a beam again. It's amazing how many times a person can forget the exact height of their own roof. The fire pit still smoulders from earlier meals, filling the space with a smoky haze. You wave your hand in front of your face, eyes watering slightly. There's no chimney, no clever ventilation trick, just smoke deciding where it wants to go. Usually, that's your lungs. You step outside again, needing air, and glance at other homes around the settlement. They all look similar, practical, sturdy, humble, each one built by hand, shaped by people who understood their environment so deeply they could literally mold it into shelter. There's a kind of beauty in that, even if the houses don't whisper comfort the way modern ones do. Someone is repairing a wall nearby, pressing fresh mud into a cracking section. You watch the rhythm of their hands, steady and practiced. Homes here are never done. They're always in a state of becoming, aging as fast as the people inside them. You help for a moment, feeling the cool mud against your palms, its weight grounding you. For a second, you feel part of something bigger, a community that survives not because it has luxury, but because it works together endlessly. Later, as dusk approaches, you return indoors. The air cools slightly, enough that you can breathe without tasting the room. You arrange your sleeping area, a mat made of woven reeds or coarse fabric that doesn't offer softness, only flatness. You smooth it out anyway, wishing it were thicker, softer, anythinger. But this is what rest looks like here. Night creeps in slowly, shadows stretching along the floor. You light a small oil lamp, watching the flame flicker. It casts warm, shaky light across the walls, giving your home a momentary softness it rarely has during the day. You sit beside it, letting the dim glow calm your mind. There's something cozy about it, even if the room itself is unforgiving. You lie down, listening to the faint sounds outside. Distant voices, a dog barking, the wind brushing against the roof, the shifting of animals settling into sleep. Your back complains immediately, but you settle anyway. People here didn't wait for comfort. They built their lives inside the limits of what they had. And as your eyes grow heavy, you realize that ancient homes weren't designed for luxury. They were designed for survival. They kept out the world's worst, even if they didn't offer much warmth. And somehow, in their roughness, they held families, traditions, stories, and generations. They endured. And so do you, at least for tonight. You wake before the sun has fully climbed, not because you're an early riser by choice, but because ancient life doesn't give you the option to sleep in. Work begins the moment light touches the ground, and sometimes even earlier, if someone decides the fire needs tending, or the animals start voicing their opinions about breakfast. You stretch your arms, feeling the stiffness from yesterday's labor still clinging to every muscle like a stubborn memory. The world outside is chilled, but not in a refreshing way. More in a your bones will need a minute way. You step out, inhale the crisp air, and look around at a settlement already stirring. Old men rubbing their eyes, women gathering tools, children chasing animals that absolutely do not want to be chased. And you? You gear up for another day of working from sunrise until the stars take over the sky. A mainstream historical fact circles your thoughts as you begin. In most ancient civilizations, the average person worked far more physically demanding hours than modern people, often 10 to 14 hours of manual labor every single day. No weekends, no mental health days, no calling in sick unless you physically couldn't stand. And even then, someone might drag you to your feet because the harvest doesn't wait. You grab a tool, a wooden hoe, a heavy basket, maybe a grinding stone, and immediately feel the weight settle into your hands. Tools here don't help you. They challenge you. Each one demands strength and absolute attention. You head to the fields, stepping over uneven ground, your body already preparing for the repetitive motion it knows too well. Bend, lift, carry, dig, repeat until time itself becomes blurry. Once in the fields, the work takes over. You move among rows of crops that barely reach your ankle, pulling weeds that grow faster than the plants you're trying to protect. The soil is stubborn today, dry, clumpy, resisting your efforts like it has a personal vendetta. You wipe sweat from your forehead, even though the sun's barely awake. It's fine. You'll be drenched soon anyway. As you work, you listen to the chorus of villagers around you. Some hum quietly, some complain loudly. Some mutter ancient prayers to agricultural gods who, to be honest, haven't been very generous this season. Historians still argue whether these daily rituals were born from genuine faith or from a desperate need to feel like something, anything, was listening when the crops refused to grow. You move to another task, lifting baskets filled with grain or clay or stones or whatever today's project demands. The baskets dig into your palms, scraping your skin until it feels raw. There are no gloves here, no ergonomic handles, just rough material pressed against tired hands. You adjust your grip, pretending it helps. By midday, the sun turns hostile. You feel it searing the back of your neck, heating the top of your head, draining every bit of energy you thought you had left. People around you keep working anyway. No stopping, no shade breaks, unless absolutely necessary. Shade is rare, work is constant, and the day doesn't care how you feel about it. You pause for water warm, smoky tasting, boiled earlier, and take a slow sip, hoping it gives you a moment of relief. It doesn't, but at least it keeps you upright. The afternoon brings a new job, grinding grain on a stone slab. You kneel, place the kernels on the rough surface, and begin pushing the heavy upper stone back and forth. Back and forth, back and forth. Your shoulders burn, your arms protest. Your knees begin planning a rebellion. A quirky historical tidbit whispers into your thoughts. Archaeologists have found ancient skeletons with grooves worn into their knee joints from years of grinding grain. Yes, grain literally carved a signature into their bones. You keep going, because stopping means someone else has to pick up your slack, and you can't let that happen. Community work is shared work. Everyone contributes. Everyone depends on everyone else. You grind until your arms feel numb, dust rising in small puffs, coating your skin. Later, as the sun begins to lower, the work shifts again. Some people repair tools. Others bring in animals. You carry bundles of firewood, each one poking your sides, scratching your arms, reminding you that everything in this world comes with a rough edge. Evening finally arrives, but the work isn't done. You help tidy the area, store tools, check the animals, and prepare for tomorrow. Your body feels drained in a way modern exhaustion could never imitate. This isn't tired after a gym session. This is every cell in your body wants to lie down and not move for a week. You return home with slow steps, dust clinging to your skin, clothes sticking to your back. You sit near the fire, stretching your legs, your joints cracking like they're auditioning for a role in a percussion ensemble. Someone beside you jokes lightly about the stars being the only things allowed to relax early. You laugh a tired, breathy sound because they're not wrong. As darkness spreads across the ancient landscape, You lie back, staring at the sky. The stars look sharp tonight, bright against the deepening blue. For a moment, the world feels still, peaceful. The work is done. The aches are real, but so is the satisfaction of a day survived in a world that doesn't make surviving easy. You exhale slowly, letting the night settle over you, knowing tomorrow will be the same, and the day after, and the day after that. But for now, you rest under the ancient sky, grateful for a few hours of quiet before the cycle begins again. You wake up the next morning already aware that your clothes, the same ones you wore yesterday, and the day before that are going to give you trouble again. In ancient civilizations, clothing isn't comfort. It's protection, identity, and sometimes just a scratchy reminder that soft fabric hasn't been invented yet. You stretch, groan, and mentally prepare to slide into garments that feel like a mix between a potato sack and a mild punishment. You pick up your tunic, holding it by the shoulders, giving it a little shake to encourage any hidden bugs to escape. A few specks of dust fall out, but nothing alarming. You slip it over your head, and immediately the coarse fibers scrape against your skin. You scratch your shoulder absent-mindedly, knowing full well it won't help. Clothes here don't adapt to you, you adapt to them. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind as you pull the fabric straight. Many ancient civilizations used wool, flax, or hemp to create clothing materials that were durable but often rough and unrefined, unless you belong to the wealthy elite. And you? You are definitely not elite. Your outfit announces that loudly. Outside, others are getting dressed too, tying belts, adjusting wraps, securing cloaks, and untangling garments that seem determined to confuse their wearers. Children run around half-dressed, which feels like the smartest strategy. They'll be hot soon anyway. You, meanwhile, are already sweating, and the sun hasn't even cleared the treetops. You bend to put on your sandals, and by sandals, I mean thin soles held together by straps that have absolutely no interest in staying tied. The moment you start walking, a strap wiggles loose, then another, until you're practically stomping the ground with what might as well be a decorative floor mat. Historians still argue whether ancient footwear was intentionally flimsy or simply worn down so quickly that people accepted the struggle as part of daily life. Once outside, your clothes begin their usual performance. The fabric pulls at your neck, the belt slips, your sleeves, if you even have sleeves, bunch up into weird shapes, and the sandals threaten to abandon your feet at the slightest provocation. You adjust everything twice. It doesn't help. You head to your tasks anyway, because clothing discomfort isn't considered a problem here. Everyone is itching, sweating, pulling at hems, and pretending they're fine. That's the ancient way. Mild suffering, normal. Significant suffering, still normal. As you walk through the settlement, you notice the different styles around you. Some people wear layered garments, others rely on simple wraps, while a few older villagers wear pieces faded by time until the colour looks like it just gave up. A quirky historical tidbit slips into your mind. In some ancient cultures, people used natural dyes like crushed insects, fermented plants, and even mud to colour their clothes. A beautiful idea until you realise the colours faded fast and smelled earthy. You sit near the fire later, mending a tear with a bone needle and thread that frays every 5 seconds. The needle is sharp, but the thread is rebellious. You push it through the cloth, squinting in the dim light. Sewing isn't optional in this world. Clothes don't last long, and you definitely don't have spare outfits waiting neatly in a chest. Once the mending is done, you put the tunic back on, and immediately feel the repaired area stiffen like a tiny patch of armor. Great. Another scratchy spot. You decide to ignore it. Survival has taught you selective awareness. The day heats up quickly, turning the fabric against your skin into a warm, sticky trap. You shift constantly, pulling the neckline forward to get a breeze, lifting the hem slightly to cool your legs, fanning yourself with your hands. But the clothes don't care. They trap heat like they're paid for it. You envy the kids again. As you help others grind grain, your sleeves keep sliding down your arms, catching dust and flour. You wipe your hands on your tunic, adding yet another mysterious stain to the growing collection. No one here has pristine clothing. Every mark tells a story: spilled soup, crushed berries, mud splashes, soot from the fire, and occasionally blood from accidental tool mishaps. By afternoon, your sandals have officially declared unionized protest. The straps loosen again, and you have to stop to retie them for the fourth time. You consider going barefoot, but the ground is full of sharp rocks, thorns, and insects with questionable intentions. So you tie the sandals tighter, knowing they'll betray you again soon. As evening settles, the temperature drops, flipping the discomfort switch in the opposite direction. The same tunic that roasted you under the sun now leaves you feeling exposed. The fabric does nothing to block the breeze, and you shiver while walking home. You layer a thin cloak over your shoulders, a cloak so scratchy that it might have been woven by someone who personally disliked softness. But it keeps the wind away, so you tolerate it. Inside your home, you change into your sleep garment, which is basically your day garment, but slightly less dirty. You lie on your mat and pull a woven blanket over yourself. It's heavy, rough, and somehow manages to be both too warm and not warm enough at the same time. Classic ancient blanket. You settle in, adjusting the fabric around your neck, your legs, your arms, until you find the least uncomfortable position available. Your skin tingles from the day's constant friction, and your feet throb from sandal warfare. But eventually, the exhaustion wins. As you drift into sleep, you realize that ancient clothing wasn't designed for comfort. It was designed for survival, to protect you from the sun, wind, insects, rough terrain, and curious glances. And even though it leaves scratches on your skin and tests your patience daily, it still does its job. Barely. Travel in ancient civilizations isn't adventure. It's risk wrapped in dust. When you wake up today, someone mentions that you'll need to walk to a distant field, not far, they say, which, in ancient terms, means prepare your feet for betrayal. You sigh, tighten the straps on your sandals, which already look offended, and begin the slow, deliberate journey beyond your familiar paths. The morning feels calm enough. The sun is gentle, the breeze is cool, and your shoulders feel light. That lasts for maybe 7 steps, because almost immediately, the uneven ground reminds you that walking here is less strolling and more negotiating every inch of terrain with your ankles. A rock shifts under your foot, threatening to twist it sideways. You regain balance, pretending you meant to do that. Ancient dignity requires pretending you're fine. A mainstream historical fact rises in your thoughts. Most ancient people walked everywhere for trade, farming, visiting relatives, gathering resources. Some walked 10 to 20 kilometers a day, sometimes more. And you feel every one of those kilometers before you've even started the real journey. As you move past the houses, the ground becomes harder, rougher. You dodge thorny bushes, whose only mission seems to be stabbing ankles. The road, if you can call it that, is a simple dirt path created not by design but by repeated footsteps. It dips, rises, cracks, and disappears in places where erosion decided to redecorate overnight. Your sandals, despite being tied tightly, betray you again. A strap slips. You stop, kneel, adjust. Dust puffs into your face. You cough. Sandal warfare, round 1. You continue onward, noticing how travel instantly changes your awareness. Every sound feels sharper: the rustle of grass, the distant call of an animal, the whisper of wind through dry leaves. You grip the small bag you're carrying just a little tighter. Historians still argue whether ancient roads were more dangerous due to bandits or wild animals, but right now you're convinced both had equal enthusiasm for ruining someone's day. As the path widens temporarily, you catch sight of other travelers approaching from the opposite direction, 2 men, carrying large bundles on their backs. Their faces are tired in that, "This has been my whole life" way. They nod at you, and you nod back, acknowledging the silent truth. Travel is exhausting for everyone, no matter who you are. You pass a small stream and pause briefly to splash some water on your face. It's cool, refreshing, until you spot a frog sitting nearby, staring at you like it knows this stream has questionable hygiene. You choose not to drink. A quirky historical tidbit floats into your mind. In some ancient cultures, people believed certain crossroads were guarded by spirits, so travelers would leave tiny offerings, pebbles, flowers, even bits of bread, to avoid angering them. You look at the fork in the path ahead. No offerings, not a pebble in sight. You gulp and keep walking. The sun climbs higher, heat settling onto your shoulders like a heavy cloak. Your tunic sticks to your back. Your steps slow slightly as the path becomes steeper. You feel sweat collecting at the base of your neck, trickling slowly down your spine. You attempt to fan yourself with your hand. It accomplishes nothing. As you climb, the wind suddenly shifts and carries with it a faint, unsettling smell. Something wild, musky, unfamiliar. You pause. Listen. Nothing. Maybe it's just the breeze. Or maybe it's an animal hiding somewhere nearby. Your heart beats a little too loudly, and you start walking again but faster, doing that ancient version of speed walking where you pretend you're not afraid, but your legs say otherwise. After some time, you reach a plateau where you can finally see your destination in the distance. A patch of fields far away, shimmering under the sunday. It looks closer than it is, which is the cruel magic of open landscapes. The wind here feels harsher, colder, as if warning you that you've left the safety of home far behind. Halfway down the slope, you stub your toe on an aggressively shaped rock. Pain shoots through your leg so sharply, you say something in a language that hasn't been invented yet. You hop on one foot, clutching your toe, the entire world momentarily reduced to why? Sandal warfare, round 2. While recovering, you notice a small structure nearby, a stone marker left by travelers long ago. Someone carved a symbol on it, weathered by time but still visible. Maybe a prayer, maybe a warning, maybe directions. You decide not to think too hard about it because the symbol looks suspiciously like a stick figure screaming. As you continue, the terrain flattens again, and you finally start to feel a rhythm. Footsteps become steady, breathing evens out, and your mind settles into that gentle, wandering mode where you begin admiring the ancient world instead of resenting it. The distant hills, the rustling grasses, the quiet chitter of insects, it's all strangely peaceful, as long as you ignore the pain in your toes and the sandal that is once again plotting your downfall. When you reach the fields at last, you sigh partly from relief, partly from disbelief that you actually made it without tripping into a ditch or being chased by something with claws. You set down your bag, stretch your back, and feel your shoulders loosen. The journey took far longer than it should have, but that's travel in ancient life. Unpredictable, tiring, occasionally terrifying, but grounded in a world that feels deeply alive. And as you catch your breath, the realization settles in. Going anywhere in ancient times isn't just movement. It's endurance, instinct, and luck stitched together. Tomorrow, you'll have to walk back. Justice in ancient civilizations doesn't sit politely in a courtroom wearing robes and speaking calmly. No justice here is loud, immediate, physical, and often terrifyingly creative. You wake up today thinking you'll spend your time tending fields or carrying water, but instead, you hear a commotion outside. Voices rising, footsteps gathering, the kind of murmurs that ripple through a community when something serious has happened. You step out, adjusting your tunic, and see a crowd forming near the central area of the settlement. People stand in a rough circle, talking in hushed tones. You approach slowly, because in ancient societies, justice is public, and if it's happening, you're expected to witness it. Your stomach tightens with that instinctive, ancient fear. Justice here isn't gentle. It's harsh, and often brutally simple. As you move closer, you see the reason for the gathering: a man kneeling on the ground, guarded by 2 others. His face is dusty, his hands bound. Someone whispers that he stole grain. Not much, just enough to fill a small bowl. But in a world where every seed is survival, even a handful of grain is life and death. A mainstream historical fact echoes in your mind. In many ancient civilizations, crimes related to food or resources were punished severely because scarcity made theft a direct threat to the entire community. Where modern courts might offer fines or rehabilitation, ancient justice leaned heavily toward physical penalties, intended to warn everyone else instantly. You watch as the village elder steps forward, a calm but unyielding figure. There is no judge's bench, no scroll of legal codes, no lawyers. Justice is spoken aloud, shaped by tradition, memory, and communal agreement. The elder asks a few witnesses to speak. Their accounts are brief, factual, sometimes emotional. There is no cross-examination, no legal jargon, just truth stated as plainly as the dust beneath your feet. The accused tries to explain himself, voice shaking. Hunger, he says. Desperation. Children at home. You feel a pang of empathy, but ancient justice is not built on soft-hearted decisions. Historians still argue whether ancient punishments were meant more for deterrence or for maintaining order in small, fragile communities where even small conflicts could unravel survival. The elder announces the decision. Not death, thankfully, but a painful penalty. Maybe lashes, maybe repayment multiplied, maybe forced labor for several days. The crowd exhales collectively, not in relief, but in acceptance. This is justice. This is how balance is kept. The punishment begins quickly, with no ceremony. A sharp crack splits the air. You flinch before the man does. You turn away momentarily, feeling the weight of the moment settle in your chest. Here, justice is about restoring equilibrium, not about kindness. Wrongdoings are mended through pain, compensation, and public witnessing. You stand there, realizing that ancient life didn't give much room for moral debates, only survival-based decisions. Later, after the punishment ends, the man is helped to his feet and escorted to complete his restitution. The crowd disperses gradually, conversations shifting from whispers to normal chatter as people return to their tasks. You stand there a bit longer, processing what you've seen, feeling the uneasy knot that forms when justice is swift enough to sting but necessary enough that no one questions it. You walk away, passing by the elder who now sits under a shaded spot. His face is thoughtful, tired. You offer a respectful nod. He nods back. The weight of this role, judge, mediator, enforcer, must be immense. You imagine him carrying decades of decisions, each one heavy, none forgotten. On your way home, you see two children playing with sticks, imitating what they just witnessed in a softer, clumsy way. You freeze for a moment, uneasy. But then a quirky historical tidbit drifts into your thoughts. In some ancient cultures, children were encouraged to mimic adult rituals and practices as a way of learning social order early. Even justice was something they were expected to understand long before adulthood. You continue walking, your mind replaying the morning. It's sobering, how quickly justice happens here. No delay, no extended trials, no documents written in ink, just decisions carved instantly into the memories of everyone who watches. By afternoon, life resumes its relentless flow. You carry water, mend tools, sweep dust from your sleeping mat. But the tension of that gathering lingers in your shoulders. You now understand something deeper about this world. Justice isn't a separate institution. It's woven into every part of daily life. Everyone watches, everyone remembers, everyone obeys out of necessity, not law books. As evening falls, you sit near the fire, the flames reflecting in your tired eyes. People talk quietly about the day's events, some sympathetic, some stern, some resigned. The ancient world doesn't pretend fairness is always possible. It just enforces rules that keep everyone alive. You lie down later, staring at the ceiling beams, thinking about how justice today was both brutal and strangely orderly. And as your eyelids grow heavy, you understand why ancient civilizations relied on such harsh systems. Their worlds were too fragile to risk imbalance. Justice here may be rough, but without it, life would be far rougher. You wake to the soft sound of murmuring voices outside, low and rhythmic, like the village itself is whispering. At first, you think it's just early chatter, but then you catch the tone reverent, careful, almost pleading. Today isn't an ordinary workday. Today, the gods demand attention. And in ancient civilizations, when the gods call, you don't hit snooze, you get up. You step into the morning light and immediately feel the shift in the air. People move with a certain quiet urgency. No one is running, but everyone seems to know exactly where they need to be. You follow the flow toward the communal gathering spot, tugging your tunic straight and trying to shake the sleep from your eyes. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind as you walk. In most ancient societies, daily life was intertwined with religion so tightly that it was impossible to separate the two. Agriculture, justice, health, weather, everything depended on divine favor. If the gods weren't happy, your crops withered, your rivers dried, your children fell ill, and your luck vanished like smoke. As you reach the gathering area, you see the priest, or maybe a shaman, or a ritual leader, depending on the region already preparing offerings. Their hands move with practiced confidence, arranging herbs, grain, and a small bowl of milk or oil on a flat stone. The smoke from incense rises lazily into the air, carrying a scent somewhere between earthy comfort and "I hope the gods like this." People gather around in a quiet circle, heads bowed. You join them, feeling both part of the group and strangely exposed. Rituals here aren't optional, they're essential, a way of bargaining with unseen forces who can turn your life upside down in an instant. You hear someone whisper beside you about last year's drought, how the ritual didn't work until they repeated it 3 times. Historians still argue whether these rituals were more about community, unity, or genuine belief in divine intervention. But when you're living in a world where nature is unpredictable and survival is fragile, belief becomes the glue that holds the day together. The priest begins chanting. The sound is deep, melodic, and soothing, vibrating through the group like a slow heartbeat. You close your eyes briefly, letting the rhythm settle your nerves. The air feels thicker, warmer, almost charged. Rituals may be simple, but they're powerful not because of magic, necessarily, but because every emotion in the community funnels into them. Then comes your least favorite part, participation. The priest gestures for a few villagers to step forward and place small offerings at the altar. You watch as someone sets down a handful of grain they could have eaten. Another places a smooth stone they found during travel, believing it carries protective energy. A quirky historical tidbit pops into your head. In some ancient cultures, people offered small figurines made of clay or bone, believing they could transfer illness or misfortune into the object and leave it behind. You place your offering too, nothing big, just a piece of herb-wrapped bread from last night. You set it down gently, hoping the gods appreciate the gesture, even if the bread was slightly burnt. The ritual shifts into movement next. A few people sway, others kneel, some raise their hands to the sky. You mimic the motions, trying not to look confused. But this is where ancient religion becomes strangely calming. Everyone is participating, everyone is trying, everyone is hoping together. It feels unifying. Suddenly, a gust of wind rustles through the group, making the flames of the incense dance wildly. People murmur. Some smile, interpreting it as a sign. Others look worried, wondering if it means the gods are restless. You stand there, unsure which interpretation to believe, but you act impressed anyway. It's safer that way. Once the ritual ends, the priest gives a short blessing, hands raised, voice steady. Everyone exhales, releasing the tension that built up throughout the morning. The offerings are left for the gods, but you know they'll either be consumed by animals later or quietly reused in tomorrow's fire. The gods don't seem to mind. As people disperse, you notice how the ritual changed the atmosphere. People walk with a bit more confidence, talk with softer voices, laugh more easily. Belief, even in its harshest, most demanding forms, gives people comfort, safety, structure, a reason to keep waking up in a world that doesn't guarantee anything. A child grabs your hand and pulls you toward a side area where small clay figurines stand arranged on a ledge. Tiny gods, protective spirits, symbolic carvings. Some are simple lumps, others are detailed faces with big eyes and stern expressions. You touch one gently. It's warm from the Sunday. The child beams, telling you it protects travelers. You don't ask if it works. You just nod. Later in the afternoon, as you work in the fields, you see people glancing at the sky, checking for signs the ritual succeeded. A cloud passing might be a blessing. A sudden bird flight might be a warning. A strange breeze might be divine approval. It's all interpretation, and yet it shapes every decision. As evening approaches, you sit near the fire again, feeling the warmth dance across your face. Someone mentions another ritual happening next week, one to ensure protection from disease. Another person scoffs, saying the gods don't care. Another swears the rituals saved their crops last year. Belief here isn't logical, it's survival. You lie down later, staring at the night sky, dotted with stars ancient people believed were the eyes of ancestors or the fires of gods. And even if you don't fully understand it, you feel something settle in your chest, a quiet acceptance that in this world, worship isn't a choice. It's the thread that holds everything together. You wake the next morning genuinely hoping that today will be easier on your body. But the moment you hear coughing from the other side of the settlement, deep and rough enough to rattle the air, you know exactly what kind of day this will be. Ancient civilizations didn't do healthcare the way you imagine it. Here, medicine is a mixture of hope, tradition, herbs, intuition, and the occasional desperate prayer whispered into the wind. You step outside and see a small group gathered around someone lying on a reed mat. Their face is pale, their breathing shallow. The village healer kneels beside them, grinding herbs with a stone mortar that looks older than half the settlement. You approach quietly, because in this world, illness isn't private. Everyone sees, everyone cares in their own way, and everyone fears catching something they can't cure. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your thoughts. Most ancient medical treatments were based on trial, error, and spiritual interpretation. Without knowledge of bacteria or viruses, healers blamed imbalanced humors, angry gods, bad air, or even malevolent spirits for sickness. Medicine wasn't science. It was survival stitched together with whatever knowledge people could gather. The healer waves you closer and hands you a bundle of herbs bitter-smelling, rough and earthy. Your job is simple. Crush them finer. You grind them slowly, feeling the fibers splinter under the stone. The healer mixes your crushed herbs with warm water, creating a paste that looks suspiciously like mud and smells worse. They apply it to the patient's chest, while murmuring chants under their breath, a mix of comfort and ritual. You watch carefully, knowing full well that none of this guarantees recovery. But in ancient times, effort itself was a kind of medicine, the hope that someone trying might be enough. Later, someone hands you a small clay cup containing a questionable-looking drink prepared for another sick villager. You sniff it. Instant regret. It smells like fermented disappointment, but you carry it anyway, because people here drink whatever might help: bitter teas, strange concoctions, smoke-infused mixtures, burnt herbs dissolved in water, anything. Historians still argue whether ancient healers were effective because of their methods, or simply because the human body sometimes survives despite everything. Either way, no one denies the healer's importance. Without them, illness would sweep through the community unchecked. As morning passes, you walk with the healer to gather more medicinal plants. They identify each with a confidence that makes you grateful. Leaves that soothe fever, roots that calm the stomach, bark that reduces pain when chewed. You follow, trying to memorize their knowledge, even though every plant looks like a slightly different shade of green to you. A quirky historical tidbit echoes in your mind. Some ancient civilizations used moldy bread to treat wounds long before anyone understood why it worked, accidentally discovering the earliest form of antibiotics. Without knowing it, ancient luck at its finest. Back in the settlement, you help prepare a poultice for someone with a deep cut across their forearm. The wound is angry-looking, swollen and warm to the touch. You try not to stare. Injuries like these can be deadly here. Infection doesn't care about good intentions. The healer cleans the wound with boiled water, sprinkles crushed charcoal across it, and wraps it with linen strips made from torn clothing. It's not comfortable, it's not sterile, but it's something, and something is often the difference between life and death. Nearby, children sneeze loudly, one after another. A mother rubs a mixture of oil and herbs across their foreheads, muttering that the gods must be testing her patience. Someone else coughs into their hands, earning a disapproving look from the healer. Hygiene exists here, sort of, but mostly as a practical instinct rather than a scientific guideline. As the sun climbs higher, the air grows warm and heavy, making the sick even more restless. You help by fanning one of them with a woven mat, trying to offer at least a little comfort. Their breathing steadies for a moment, and you feel a flicker of hope, even though you know not every story here ends well. By afternoon, the healer calls for help preparing a smoky remedy. You gather dried herbs, toss them into a clay bowl, and watch them burn slow and aromatic. The smoke rises thick and fragrant, filling the small space with a haze meant to clear lungs, soothe minds, or possibly just distract suffering patients long enough for the body to do its own work. The healer hands you a small charm, a carved piece of bone wrapped in twine. "Hang this above the door," they say softly, "to keep the sickness from returning." You nod, not because you fully believe it, but because belief itself is a medicine here, and you're not willing to risk ignoring it. Evening settles in, and the coughing outside grows quieter, either from exhaustion or from the herbs finally taking effect. You sit near the fire with others, tired from the emotional weight of the day. Illness takes something from everyone: the patient, the healer, the helpers, the community. You sip warm water slowly, letting the heat calm your breathing. A few people whisper stories of miraculous recoveries from years past. Others share memories of loved ones lost. The air feels heavy with shared fear and fragile hope. Someone mentions that a nearby village is struggling with fever, and instantly the settlement goes quiet. Illness spreads fast, especially when people travel by foot, share tools, or drink from the same water sources. As night deepens, you lie on your mat, staring at the shadows dancing on the ceiling. The scent of burnt herbs still clings to your clothes. You hear soft coughing somewhere in the distance, not as harsh as before, but still worrying. You breathe slowly, trying to accept the truth. Medicine in ancient civilizations is uncertain, inconsistent, and often frightening. But it's also full of human effort, hands grinding herbs, voices chanting for healing, communities gathering around the sick, and healers carrying generations of trial and error knowledge. You close your eyes, whispering a quiet hope into the dark that tomorrow brings fewer coughs, fewer fevers, fewer dangers. Because here, every healthy morning is a miracle. You wake to a breeze that feels too cold for comfort, the kind that sneaks through every gap in your home and settles on your skin like a warning. When you step outside, the world is alive, not in a peaceful way, but in a way that reminds you how tiny you are compared to nature. Ancient civilizations didn't just live near nature, they lived under its rule. Every gust of wind, every shift in the clouds, every distant animal call had meaning. And today you can feel that meaning pressing against you. You look up at the sky. The clouds move fast, thick and low, like they're in a hurry to get somewhere. People around you notice it too. A few mutter that the weather is turning. One person spits on the ground, saying the wind smells strange. Another nods solemnly, claiming that storms speak before they arrive. You inhale deeply, trying to catch the scent. They're talking about damp earth, sharp air, and something metallic. It raises the tiny hairs on your arms. A mainstream historical fact drifts across your thoughts. Ancient people depended heavily on reading natural signs, cloud shapes, wind direction, animal behavior, because accurate weather forecasting didn't exist. A sudden storm could destroy crops, homes, and entire lives. Predicting nature wasn't superstition, it was survival. You head toward the fields with others, baskets in hand, walking more quickly than usual because the sky looks increasingly unfriendly. The wind pushes against your back as if urging you along. Grass bends sideways under its force. A few birds take off suddenly, flying low and fast. Someone near you curses softly. Birds don't behave like that unless they're running from something. As you reach the fields, the air feels heavier. The plants sway violently, not with grace, but with desperation. You crouch to check the soil. It's dry but cool, meaning whatever is coming is close. You start gathering what you can. Herbs, vegetables, grains, anything harvestable before nature decides otherwise. Your hands work faster than your thoughts, moving with the instinct of someone who lives under constant natural threat. A loud crack rips through the distance, thunder, sharp and early. You freeze for half a second, then continue working, heart pounding a little harder. Someone beside you says the gods must be angry. Another mutters that storms aren't about gods, they're about mountains breathing. Historians still argue whether these old beliefs were symbolic or literal interpretations of natural phenomena, but when the sky roars like that, you almost believe anything. The clouds darken. Shadows creep across the ground. The entire world feels like it's bracing. You grab as much as you can and run toward the settlement with others, the wind now strong enough to shove you sideways. Dust stings your eyes. Your clothes flap violently against your skin. The air tastes electric. By the time you make it back inside, the first drops fall huge, cold, aggressive. They strike the earth with force, sending up tiny bursts of dirt. You watch through the small doorway as the rain intensifies, turning instantly from drizzle to downpour. You can barely see beyond a few meters. The storm swallows everything else. Water starts leaking through the roof, thin streams sliding down the walls. You scramble to move bedding and pottery out of the way, pushing baskets further into the corner. Another leak forms, and another. Ancient homes don't fight storms, they tolerate them. A quirky historical tidbit slides into your mind. Some ancient civilizations used thatch, or reeds, woven so tightly that water trickled down intentionally into jars placed beneath, using the storm as a water source rather than trying to stop it. Clever, you think, but your own roof clearly missed that design memo. Lightning flashes, illuminating the entire room for a split second. It leaves behind an afterimage burned into your vision. A child cries somewhere nearby. Adults shout instructions. Someone calls out that the animals are panicking. You step outside again, not because you want to, but because ancient life rarely gives you the luxury of staying safe indoors. Rain slams against your skin like cold needles. The wind nearly knocks you sideways. You help secure the animal pen, tying ropes tighter, reinforcing wooden stakes that shake dangerously. The goats bleat loudly, terrified. You murmur whatever comforting words come to mind. Even though you can barely hear yourself over the storm's roar, you squint toward the fields, or where the fields used to be. They're now just blurred patches of earth turning into mud. Water flows in small streams, cutting channels through the soil. You feel your stomach drop. This storm isn't just inconvenient, it's destructive. Hours pass in chaotic rhythm, running to help someone patch a roof, dragging items to higher ground, gathering children who slip in the mud, checking on elders whose homes are most fragile. Every task is urgent, every movement is soaked, every breath is cold. When the rain finally weakens, the world looks different. Not destroyed entirely, but altered. Mud everywhere. Water pooling in unexpected places. Tools scattered. Debris tangled in reeds and fences. You breathe heavily, exhausted. Clothes clinging to you like second skin. As the clouds begin drifting away, someone points to the distant hills, a faint rainbow forming, its colors soft and pale. A quiet awe spreads through the group. People stand still, staring. Even after nature delivers its worst, it still offers moments of strange beauty. You help clean the mess as evening approaches. Mud cakes your feet, your hands ache, but there's relief mixed in with the exhaustion, relief that the storm passed, that the settlement still stands, that no one was lost today. Later, you sit near a fire someone manages to rekindle. Steam rises from your clothes as they dry. People speak softly, recounting what happened, sharing stories of past storms. Some laugh, some sigh, some simply lean into each other. You lie down afterward, legs trembling from effort, listening to the dripping roof and the quiet settling of the earth after chaos. Nature is beautiful, but ancient civilizations teach you quickly beauty doesn't mean safe. Nature is a friend when it offers harvests, and a monster when it unleashes storms. You close your eyes, exhausted but grateful the night is finally calm. You wake the next morning feeling like the storm from yesterday is still inside your bones, a low, dull heaviness that makes you move slower than usual. But ancient life doesn't care about your soreness. It doesn't pause to let you stretch or recover. Today, the world shows you another reminder of how unpredictable, unforgiving, and frightening it can be. The kind of danger that doesn't roar in the sky, but arrives in silence. You step outside expecting the usual morning bustle, but instead you feel an eerie stillness. People speak quietly, glancing toward the hills. A few stand with spears in hand, crude, old, but sharp enough to look serious. You follow their gaze and notice faint smoke drifting in the distance. Not the soft, harmless smoke from cooking fires. This smoke rises in a thin, straight line, dark and unnatural. You freeze. Smoke like that means one thing in ancient times: strangers. And strangers never simply visit. A mainstream historical fact flickers in your mind. Most ancient warfare wasn't massive battles between giant armies. It was small-scale raids, sudden, fast, brutal attacks by nearby tribes, rival settlements, or groups looking for food, tools, and livestock. These raids could happen without warning, often at dawn when people were most vulnerable. Your heartbeat quickens. You grip your tunic tighter, wishing you had something to defend yourself with. But even if you did, your hands would shake. You're not a warrior. You're just someone trying to survive another morning. The elders gather quickly, speaking in hushed tones. One of them raises a hand, signaling silence. His voice is steady, but heavy. Scouts saw figures near the outer fields. Armed, moving slowly, watching. You swallow hard. That's worse than charging. Watching means planning. The settlement responds instantly. People rush to move children and elders inside sturdier homes. Tools get hidden. Animals are brought close. A few younger villagers grab old shields, wooden ones with cracked edges, and sharpened sticks that pretend to be weapons. Historians still argue whether ancient communities trained regularly for raids, or simply acted out of desperation when danger arrived. Judging by the trembling hands around you, training wasn't exactly a thing. You help secure the animals, tying ropes fast, trying to quiet the goats, who seem to sense something wrong. The air grows tense, thick with anticipation. Even the wind feels still, as if waiting for something to decide whether it should breathe or hold its breath. A shout rings from the edge of the settlement. Then you see them figures emerging from behind the trees, carrying spears, their silhouettes sharp against the sunlight. They move in a tight formation, not running but not wandering either. Purposeful steps, eyes scanning everything. You feel your stomach twist. Your body reacts before your mind does. You duck behind a low wall, heart slamming in your chest. People around you scramble for positions not organized, not strategic, just human instinct to hide from danger. Someone whispers a short prayer, voice trembling. The raiders stop just far enough that you can see their shapes clearly, but not their faces. One of them steps forward, raises a hand, and shouts something in a language you don't fully understand. The tone is unmistakable. A demand. Maybe they want food. Maybe tools. Maybe animals. Maybe everything. Tension crackles through the settlement like dry grass ready to catch fire. One of your elders steps forward, hands raised, speaking calmly. You can't hear the words, but you can read the meaning: negotiation. Ancient raids didn't always end in blood. Sometimes they were resolved with offerings, grain, livestock, cloth, anything to protect the settlement. But today, the raiders shake their heads. Their leader gestures sharply, pointing toward the storage huts. They want everything. You watch the elder's shoulders drop, the smallest movement, but it tells you everything. There's no peaceful solution. Then it happens. A raider steps too close. One of your villagers panics, shouting for them to back away. A spear lifts. Another voice shouts. A sudden blur of motion cuts across your vision. Ciao ziginiches. Villagers scatter. Raiders charge. You duck lower as someone yells for you to stay hidden. The clash is raw and desperate, nothing like choreographed battles in movies. This is clumsy, frantic survival. Spears hit wood, sticks hit shields. People scream. Dust rises, swallowing everything. You stay hidden until instinct forces you to move. You rush to help a woman who's fallen near the doorway, pulling her inside as fast as you can. Her arm is cut, bleeding, but she tells you to go help others. Grab supplies, do something. You run back outside, adrenaline flooding your body. It feels like time stretches and compresses all at once. You help push a storage crate against a doorway. You guide children to hide behind pottery jars. You hear the cracking sound of a weapon striking a wall. A dog barks wildly. Someone cries your name. Amid the chaos, a quirky historical tidbit surfaces. Some ancient cultures believed that battles weren't just fights between people, but clashes between the protective spirits of each community. In moments like this, you almost wish those spirits were real. After what feels like endless minutes, a loud horn blasts from the raiders' side. The sound cuts through the noise like a blade. The raiders pull back quickly, efficiently. They grab a few sacks of grain and a goat, then retreat toward the hills. Not victory, not defeat, just leaving. And just like that, the world falls silent again. People emerge slowly, cautious, shaken, bruised. You check your arms, your legs. Somehow, you're unhurt. But inside, your chest still feels tight, your breath ragged. You look around at the settlement. Minor damage. A few broken tools, scattered baskets, a cracked wall. It could have been so much worse. You help gather the injured, assisting the healer who's already preparing herbs. Most wounds are small cuts, bruises, scrapes, but the emotional weight feels enormous. Children cling to their parents. Elders sit quietly, staring at nothing. The adrenaline fades, leaving exhaustion in its place. As the sun lowers behind the hills, you finally sit near the fire, legs trembling. People recount what they saw, each story blending fear with relief. Someone jokes softly that at least the raiders didn't take the precious onions stored for the festival. Laughter ripples through the group, not joyful laughter, but survival laughter, the kind that keeps people sane. You lie down later, staring at the ceiling in the dim firelight, listening to the settlement breathe tired, shaken, but still whole. Ancient life teaches you over and over that danger doesn't always roar from the sky. Sometimes it walks quietly on 2 feet. And today, you survived it. You wake the next morning with a strange heaviness in your chest. Not fear, not exhaustion, but something softer, something tied to memory. After yesterday's chaos, the settlement feels quieter than usual, almost fragile. People move gently, voices low, as if even sound might crack the calm that barely settled overnight. But today isn't about raiders, or storms, or danger. Today is about something deeper. The ancient expectations placed on you from the moment you're born. You step outside and immediately notice how families gather in small pockets around the settlement. Parents with children, siblings sweeping the ground together, elders giving instructions that come out sounding more like warnings. It's a normal scene, but the weight behind it hits you differently today. In ancient civilizations, your family isn't just where you live. It decides your role, your future, your value, and your responsibilities, long before you can form your own opinions. A group of children run past you, laughing loudly, their feet kicking up dust. But even their play looks structured, one pretending to carry water, another mimicking grinding grain, another shouting orders like a tiny overseer. You can't help but smile, but it also reminds you of a mainstream historical fact. Ancient kids didn't really get childhood the way you picture it. Playtime was practice. Every game prepared them for work. Every day pushed them closer to adult roles. A woman calls out to a little girl, telling her to stop wasting energy and help her mother. The girl groans dramatically, but obeys, picking up a small basket and following. You watch her tiny shoulders tense under the weight, and for a moment, you feel that familiar ache in your chest, empathy born from remembering how early expectations begin here. As you head toward the communal area, an elder stops you, placing a hand on your shoulder. His eyes linger on you with that ancient expression of, "Are you doing your part?" And honestly, you're not sure you ever truly are. Families here revolve around contribution. You don't get to choose your path. The path chooses you. If your parents gather herbs, you gather herbs. If they shape clay, you shape clay. If they farm, you farm. Historians still argue whether rigid family roles created stability or suffocated individuality. But standing here, feeling the elders' gaze on you, you understand both sides. Stability keeps the settlement functioning, but individuality? Well, that's a luxury no one here has time for. You help an older woman carry firewood back to her home. Her steps are slow, but her voice is sharp. She talks about how her parents raised her strict rules, early mornings, relentless work. She says it without bitterness, just acceptance. You realize ancient people didn't resent these expectations because they didn't know any other world. Duty wasn't a burden, it was identity. Inside her home, she sets the firewood down and motions for you to sit. She begins weaving a small basket, and you watch her fingers move quick, practiced, almost poetic. She explains each motion, as if you're a child again. You try weaving a small section, and your result looks like tangled vines in a fistfight. She laughs, a warm sound that cuts through the morning's heaviness. Then she tells you a quirky historical tidbit. In some ancient cultures, families believed skills passed down through blood, that a child was born already knowing the work of their ancestors, even if it didn't show until they practiced it. You glance down at your misshapen weaving and smile awkwardly. Your ancestors were clearly not basket makers. As the afternoon settles in, you walk to the fields with others from your household. Here, family roles become even clearer. The older men direct irrigation, the younger ones do the heavy lifting. The women handle delicate tasks, like selecting seeds or checking plant health, and children run around delivering tools or shoeing animals. No one needs to explain what to do, everyone just knows. You pick up your assigned task, bending down to check soil moisture with your hands. The dirt slips between your fingers, gritty and warm. You wiggle your fingers deeper, feeling for roots. It's a simple action, but oddly grounding. Someone nearby comments that you're finally learning your place. They say it as a compliment. It still stings. Later, you rest under a tree with a few others. One man talks about his son, already showing talent in shaping clay. Another talks about his daughter, good at recognizing medicinal plants. There's pride in their voices, but that pride is tangled with expectation. Children aren't allowed to dream beyond the roles carved for them. Dreams that don't serve the community are considered dangerous. But then, an older woman speaks up, saying she once wanted to learn songs from a traveling storyteller who passed through when she was young. She'd sneak away at dusk to listen. Her parents disapproved not because they disliked music, but because singing didn't fill granaries or repair roofs. She laughs softly, saying she still hums those melodies in secret when no one is watching. You catch the tune under her breath. It's haunting, beautiful, and just a little rebellious. In that moment, you understand something. Ancient family roles shaped people, but they never fully erased inner desires. They just buried them deep under survival, responsibility, and necessity. Evening arrives. Everyone gathers for the evening meal, sitting close in a circle. You watch how family members lean into each other, tired, hungry, but connected. Parents serve children first. Older siblings help younger ones tear pieces of grain cake. Elders receive the first ladle of stew. No one questions the order. It's tradition, invisible and unquestioned. You feel a warmth settle around you, not the heat of the fire, but the quiet comfort of belonging. Ancient life is harsh, but this part is soft. Families aren't perfect here, but they're binding, reliable, and constant in a world that changes too suddenly. As you lie down later, you think about your place, the duties you inherited, the expectations pressed onto your shoulders, the subtle pressure that shapes every decision. You breathe deeply, letting the night breeze carry in the sounds of families settling together, whispering quietly, sharing warmth, sharing fear, sharing hope. In ancient civilizations, family roles don't just guide your life, they are your life. And even with all the weight they carry, there's something undeniably grounding about knowing exactly where you belong. You wake to the sound of voices that don't belong to your village, unfamiliar tones, different rhythms, strange words sprinkled into the morning like spices you've never tasted. For a moment, you think you're still dreaming, but when you step outside and see strangers leading donkeys, carrying baskets, and unrolling cloth you've never seen before, you realize what kind of day this is. It's market day. And in ancient civilizations, market day is the closest thing you get to magic. The usual dusty open space near the center of the settlement has transformed. Blankets and woven mats lie spread across the ground, each one turning into a temporary stall. Clay pots, tools, baskets, jars of oil, bundles of herbs, chunks of salt, and oddly shaped objects you can't name all wait to be traded. There's no neon sign, no storefront, no buy one get one free, just people, items, and negotiations that decide whether you eat well next week or go hungry. You step closer, drawn by the sound of overlapping voices. People haggle in a way that sounds half argument, half performance. This isn't just shopping, this is strategy. You don't have coins in your pocket. You don't even have pockets. You have goods. Things you made or grew or gathered. Trade here isn't based on numbers written on paper. It's based on how much someone feels something is worth. A mainstream historical fact floats through your mind. For a long time, many ancient economies functioned primarily on barter and in-kind payments, rather than regular coin use. Even when coins existed, everyday people still swapped grain, cloth, animals, and labor, instead of jingling metal in their hands. You clutch the small bundle you brought with you, maybe dried herbs, maybe finely woven cord, maybe a little surplus grain if the last harvest was kind. It doesn't look like much, and that's because it isn't. But you're hoping it's enough to get you a tool repair, a better pot, or, if the gods are ridiculously kind, something fun like a sweet fruit from far away. You approach a trader whose blanket is lined with small knives, fishing hooks, and strange beads that shimmer faintly when they catch the light. He looks at your bundle, then at your face, then back at the bundle. He raises an eyebrow. You already know this won't be easy. You place your herbs in front of him and gesture toward a knife, small, sharp, well-balanced. You can already imagine using it to cut reeds, prepare food, maybe even defend yourself if life continues to be dramatic. The trader smiles, that particular merchant smile that says, "I will absolutely test your patience." You both begin the dance of exchange. You talk up your herbs like they're the best plants that ever grew. You mention how they help with headaches, bad sleep, and stomach aches. He grunts, unimpressed. He taps the knife meaningfully, reminding you that metal doesn't grow on trees. You add another small handful to the bundle. He pretends to consider. You sigh, knowing exactly what he's doing, and it works anyway. Historians still argue whether ancient traders genuinely believed in fair value or simply took advantage of whoever stepped up first and looked nervous. Judging by your current situation, you're leaning toward the second option. Finally, you reach a deal. Your herbs and a little promise of future grain at harvest time for the knife. It doesn't feel entirely fair, but nothing here is perfectly balanced. You accept because survival doesn't wait for the perfect bargain. You tuck the knife into your belt and wander deeper into the crowd. The market is more than noise and objects its information. You hear rumors of distant lands where the rivers never dry, of cities with walls so high they scrape the sky, of temples covered in shining stone. You hear people discussing droughts in neighboring regions, raids on the other side of the valley, and new rulers who tax too harshly and drink even harder. This is how news travels, not through letters or screens, but through tired traders, gossiping farmers, and wandering storytellers who package information inside gripping tales. At one stall, you see something that instantly captures your attention: salt. Simple, white, precious. You stare at it like it's treasure, because it is. You know you don't have enough to get a chunk of it today, but you still let yourself imagine adding it to your bland grain stew. For a moment, you can almost taste it. The trader notices your gaze and leans forward, telling you a quirky tidbit. In some places, he says, people are paid in salt instead of grain or cloth. It's that valuable. You laugh softly, wondering if anyone has ever been late on their salt pay. Probably not a fun conversation. You move on, weaving between bodies and baskets, stepping over the occasional chicken who clearly signed no contracts about staying put. The smell of the market hits you in waves: sweat, clay, fresh vegetables, dried meat, smoke from cooking fires, a faint undertone of animal pens. It's overwhelming, but also strangely comforting. This is the smell of life continuing, despite storms, raids, and sickness. You stop at a stall with bright-coloured cloth strips dyed with plants and maybe insects from faraway places. You touch one lightly. It's softer than your usual fabric, smoother under your fingers. You want it. You absolutely cannot afford it. The trader sees the look in your eyes and smiles knowingly, as if he's seen that wish 1,000 times. You trade only for what you truly need today. Some thread, a better pot, maybe a small bit of dried fruit if you manage to argue well. The fruit is tough and chewy, but sweet enough to feel like a festival in your mouth. For a few seconds, your taste buds remember that joy exists. As the sun climbs, the market swells with voices. People argue, laugh, sing, and shout across the open space. A musician appears with a simple stringed instrument, playing a tune that draws kids closer. The little ones sway and clap badly out of rhythm. You sit near them, letting the music wash over you. Trade here isn't just things. It's stories, music, personality, and the strange comfort of knowing people from far away are struggling just as much as you are. Later in the afternoon, you watch as a group of traders packs up. They tie their goods back onto donkeys or into sacks slung across their backs. You realize, not for the first time, how dangerous their lives are, walking long distances, sleeping outdoors, relying on the kindness, or lack of hostility, of strangers, always at risk from weather, animals, and raiders. You overhear someone say that, without traders, half the village would starve in a bad season. Another grumbles that traders charge too much. Both are right. Trade is a blessing and a frustration at the same time. When the last traders leave, and the market slowly dissolves back into bare ground, the settlement feels different. Heavier, but fuller. People carry new objects, new worries, new bits of news. You walk back to your home with your new knife, your slightly lighter stash of goods, and your mind buzzing with distant stories. As night settles in and you lie on your mat, you think about how fragile life here is, and how much it depends on the quiet, constant flow of things and people moving between places. Grain for tools, cloth for salt, herbs for metal, stories for safety. In ancient civilizations, money doesn't sit in banks and glow on screens. It walks on tired feet, carried in baskets, and tied to the backs of animals. And every time someone shows up with something you can't make yourself, the world feels a little bigger, and your chances of surviving it feel just a little higher. You said, ChatGPT said, you wake up the next day with a dull ache in your legs from all the moving around yesterday. But today's heaviness feels different. There's no storm on the horizon, no strangers marching toward the settlement, no frantic whispers about sickness. Instead, the air carries something softer, almost hopeful. Because today, people are preparing for something they rarely get, a moment of escape. Not escape from danger, escape from monotony. You see it immediately as you step outside. A drum rests against a wall. Someone has brought out a carved flute. A few woven mats are being spread across the ground, and the older men are pretending they're not practicing dance steps, even though their feet give them away. It's festival day, or as close as your ancient civilization ever comes to having fun. Entertainment here isn't constant. It's not a button you press or a screen you tap. It's precious, rare, a brief drop of sweetness in a world that often tastes like dust. And when it finally arrives, everyone clings to it like dry earth soaking up the first rain. But first, there's still work. Of course there is. You help gather wood for the cooking fires. Everyone contributes ingredients, grains, herbs, dried vegetables, a handful of fruits someone traded for last week, and the crown jewel, a small portion of meat. That alone makes the day special. In ancient times, meat isn't an everyday luxury. It's a festival treasure, something you savor slowly, because you don't know when you'll taste it again. As the meal cooks, the smell begins to spread through the settlement. Warm, rich, layered. People inhale like they're trying to breathe in happiness itself. A child passes by you, eyes wide, whispering that the air tastes like magic. You ruffle their hair, understanding exactly what they mean. A mainstream historical fact trickles into your thoughts. Ancient festivals weren't just parties, they were community rituals meant to honor gods, mark seasons, celebrate harvests, or simply maintain morale. When life is hard, celebration becomes survival in its own way. When the sun climbs, the first performance begins. A storyteller, an older woman with a booming voice and expressive hands, steps into the center of the group. She doesn't have props or costumes, just words, and the power to transform the dusty ground into a battlefield, a mountain path, or a palace where heroes once walked. You sit cross-legged, mesmerized. She tells a story about a trickster spirit who disguised itself as a goat to sneak into villages and steal food. The kids giggle. The adults smirk knowingly. And you find yourself leaning forward, eager, like a child again. For a few minutes, you forget the weight of ancient life. You're lost in the tale, swept away by a voice that carries both wisdom and mischief. A quirky historical tidbit drifts into your mind. In some ancient cultures, storytellers were so valued that they could travel safely between rival tribes because everyone agreed stories were too important to lose. Imagine having a job so essential that even enemies spare you. After the story ends, music begins uneven at first, because the drum player clearly didn't warm up, but soon it settles into a steady rhythm. The flute joins. The clacking of wooden sticks adds texture, and suddenly there's a melody swirling through the air. People rise from the ground, moving in small steps, swaying gently. There's no choreographed routine, no polished performance, just bodies relaxing for the first time in too long. You join them, feeling awkward at first, but the rhythm is forgiving. So are the people. Laughter bubbles up everywhere, light and easy. You're dancing on uneven ground, under a sky that normally feels like it's watching your every mistake. But right now, the sky feels like it's smiling. Later, someone brings out carved animal masks, a tradition that comes with equal parts joy and embarrassment. You try one on. It smells like old wood, smoke, and whatever storage basket it lived in for the past year. But the moment you step into the crowd wearing it, people cheer. Children laugh. An elder chuckles and tells you to act like the creature you're wearing. You try, badly. More laughter. Then a mock wrestling match starts. Two strong young men step into a circle drawn in the dust, each one trying to toss the other out. People shout encouragement from the edges. A goat wanders into the circle at one point, completely ruining the tension. Even the wrestlers laugh. Entertainment here isn't polished. It's messy, human, real. When it's time to eat, the meal is shared equally. No one hoards the better parts. Even the smallest child gets a taste of the meat. You chew slowly, savoring every bit of flavor you can. It's simple, but in a world of bland grain and bitter herbs, it tastes like wealth. As the day cools, another performance begins, a dance meant to honor the spirits of the land. The movements are slow and deliberate. Even if you're not fully certain what each gesture means, you feel its weight. Historians still argue whether these dances were literal rituals or symbolic expressions of gratitude and fear. But when the dancers' feet move in synchronicity, stirring the dust beneath them, you feel something ancient and heavy settle in your chest. Night falls, and the fire becomes the centerpiece. Sparks rise into the dark. Someone begins singing a low melodic chant. Others join in. You don't know all the words, but you hum along, letting the vibrations settle into your bones. The stars appear overhead. For once, they don't look threatening. They look like distant lanterns, soft and watchful. As you lie back on the ground, full from the meal, warm from the fire, and tired from dancing, you feel a rare sense of peace. Entertainment in ancient times doesn't erase the hardships of life, but it eases them, lets you breathe, lets you remember that even in a brutal world, people always find ways to laugh, dance, sing, and celebrate. And in those moments, it doesn't feel like survival. It feels like living. You wake the next morning to the feeling of eyes on you before you even step outside. Not in a spooky way, in the very real, very ancient way, where everyone in the community notices everything you do, because that's how survival works. You stretch, roll your shoulders, and already you can hear it. The soft murmur of people talking, the clink of pots, the rustle of sweeping, and the occasional little pause in conversation when someone walks by. Today, the world reminds you that in ancient civilizations, you don't just belong to a community, you're owned by it a little. When you step outside, the first thing you see is your neighbor already busy sweeping the area in front of their home. Not just their doorway, but the shared path too. That's how things work here. Everyone cares for the spaces between homes, because those spaces aren't no one's land. They're everyone's. You nod, offer a half-awake greeting, and grab your own broom. You don't dare skip it, not because you love sweeping, but because you can already imagine the looks. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind as you brush dust aside. In many ancient communities, reputation wasn't a distant, abstract thing. It was your social currency. With no formal police, no digital records, and very little privacy, your survival depended on how trustworthy, hard-working, and cooperative other people thought you were. As you work, you feel the gentle pressure of 100 invisible expectations pressing in on you. Help with communal tasks. Show up for rituals. Don't waste resources. Don't act selfish. Don't disappear when there's trouble. The list is endless, unwritten, and absolutely non-negotiable. A group of women sit together nearby, grinding grain. They talk as they work, not loudly, not maliciously, but constantly. Names drift in and out of the conversation. Someone's son who didn't help repair a roof last week. Someone's daughter who's too slow in the fields. Someone who doesn't participate enough in rituals. You're not in the conversation yet. But you know how easily you could be. You carry a jug toward the water source, passing a pair of elders sitting in the shade. Their eyes follow you calm, knowing, quietly evaluating. They've lived through more storms, raids, and bad harvests than you can imagine. Their instinct for who pulls their weight and who doesn't is sharp. You offer them a respectful nod, making sure your posture says, "Look, I'm useful, I'm trying." Historians still argue whether this constant social monitoring was more protective or suffocating. On one hand, it kept communities tightly knit and responsive. On the other, it meant you were never really alone. Your choices weren't just yours. They were everyone's business. At the water source, you greet a few others. One woman smiles and thanks you again for helping her during the storm, her words gentle and sincere. Another barely looks at you, clearly still annoyed you didn't show up to help tether animals during the raid. You feel that annoyance like a small stone in your shoe, not painful enough to stop everything, but impossible to ignore. On the way back, You pass the communal oven, where bread will be baked later. A few people are gathered there already, kneading dough, exchanging stories. Someone laughs loud and unfiltered. Someone else throws back their head dramatically, retelling how they single-handedly scared a raider away yesterday, which you know is only half true at best. You join them briefly, placing your jug down and helping shape a few rounds of dough. One of the older women nearby leans over and whispers a quirky little tidbit. In some places, she says, if someone refuses to share bread or help bake it, people say the dough will rise against them, and the gods will deny them good fortune. You grin, because it's silly, but you also quietly commit to never skipping bread duty. As the day goes on, communal tasks pull you in like a tide. You help mend the communal fence. You help check the storage rooms. You help hammer a loose roof beam back into place. No one ordered you. No one wrote your name on a list. But if you don't show up, people will notice the empty space where you should be. In the afternoon, you see it play out clearly with someone else. A young man lingers at the edge of the group, while others work together to clear debris near the fields. He pretends to adjust his sandals, inspect the sky, check the tools, anything except actually pick one up. People glance his way. No one calls him out directly, but the looks are sharp, quick, and shared. Later, when the work ends and everyone rests in the shade, his name comes up in conversation lightly at first. Someone jokes that his arms must be allergic to effort. Another chuckles. The joke repeats, gets carried further, grows sharper. And just like that, his reputation shifts a little. Not because of a big scandal, but because of a dozen tiny choices. You watch, quietly absorbing the lesson. In this world, you don't get to coast, even when you're tired, even when you're upset, even when life feels unfair. The community doesn't see your excuses. It sees your actions. Yet it's not all pressure and judgment. In the evening, you feel the softer side of this communal net. A child trips and falls hard, scraping their knee and bursting into tears. Before the mother even stands up, 3 people rush in, one with cloth, one with water, one with a silly face to make the child laugh. No one says, "Is this my responsibility?" They just move. Later, someone's roof beam actually does collapse, not completely, but enough to be dangerous. Within minutes, people are there with poles, ropes, extra hands, calming words. You join in, pushing upward with everyone else, feeling the weight of the wood pressed into your palms and the weight of shared effort pressed into your chest. This is the trade. The price of belonging. Constant watchfulness, yes, but also constant backup. The sky begins to darken, shading the settlement in soft blues and greys. You sit near the fire with a small group, the glow warming your face. Conversation drifts lazily around you. Who worked hard this week? Who needs help with seeds? Whose grandmother isn't feeling well? Who's thinking about asking someone's daughter to marry? Everything is communal. Even feelings get discussed in groups. You think back to markets, storms, raids, sickness. All of it would be unbearable alone. You realize how easily a single person could be crushed under the weight of this brutal world if they didn't have a net of people to catch them. But you also understand now that this net isn't soft. It's made of duty, obligation, gossip, expectation, and memory. People will help you. They will also never forget the days you didn't help them. As you lie down to sleep, listening to quiet murmurs drifting between homes, you feel it again, that strange, double-edged comfort. You are never alone here. That's the blessing and the trap. In ancient civilizations, community doesn't just support you. It shapes you, squeezes you, watches you, and, whether you like it or not, holds you together. You said, ChatGPT said, you wake the next day already feeling the season pressing against your skin before you even step outside. The air is colder than yesterday, not biting, but sharp enough to make you pull your tunic tighter. In ancient civilizations, seasons don't quietly shift in the background like a calendar notification. They arrive like rulers. They dictate everything: what you eat, what you wear, how you work, how you survive. When you step outside, the world feels different. The ground is harder. The sky is a pale grey blue. People move slowly, rubbing their hands together, blowing warm breath into their palms. Even the animals sense it. Goats huddle closer, Chickens fluff their feathers aggressively, and the dog that usually greets you with enthusiasm barely lifts its head from its warm patch of ground. Someone mutters that winter will be early this year. Another person argues that the winds feel more like late autumn than mid-autumn. Historians still argue about how ancient people predicted seasonal changes. Some watched stars, some watched animals, some watched clouds, and some just relied on the oldest person in the village who claimed the air smelled like change. But no matter how you predict it, the truth remains. The season decides everything. You walk toward the storage area with a few others to check the grain supplies. When the seasons shift, people become nervous, careful, more aware of shortages. You lift the lid of a large clay jar and peer inside. Grain still sits there, but not as much as you'd hoped. The last storm ruined some crops. The raid took a few sacks. Winter arriving early could squeeze your food supply tighter than your sandals squeeze your toes. As you help measure and sort, you feel the underlying hum of worry spreading through everyone. Even children sense it. They're quieter today. They know instinctively that adults don't joke when the season changes. A mainstream historical fact floats through your thoughts. Ancient agricultural societies lived at the mercy of seasonal cycles. One good season meant survival. 2 bad seasons in a row could mean collapse. There were no backups, no supermarkets, no emergency storage far away, just whatever the earth gave or didn't give. After checking supplies, you join a group heading to the fields to salvage what little can be taken before the weather worsens. The plants look tired, drooping slightly. Leaves curl inward defensively. You kneel and touch the soil. It's colder than usual, with a faint crunch, tiny frost. You weren't expecting to feel that this early. Someone beside you curses quietly. Someone else makes the sign of a local deity, asking for mercy. You simply start gathering what you can. Herbs and roots mostly. Things that can handle a bit of cold but not prolonged frost. The wind picks up, brushing ice into your bones. You pull your cloak closer, wishing it were thicker. A child passes by carrying sticks for firewood, teeth chattering. Their mother calls them back, scolding loudly, but you can hear the worry underneath every word. You continue working as the day grows colder, your breath visible in front of your face. The cold stiffens your fingers, making simple movements clumsy. Your ears burn, your nose runs. Every step feels heavier. You wish, not for the first time, that warm clothing existed in this world, not just rough, scratchy fabric that reluctantly traps heat. Around mid-afternoon, someone shouts that the hills have turned white. You look up, and sure enough, a thin coating of snow dusts the higher ground. Early snow. That's a bad omen. People exchange worried glances. The elder beside you murmurs something about short seasons and angry skies. A quirky historical tidbit flickers into your mind. In some ancient cultures, people believed seasons were controlled by deities who had arguments with each other. If winter came early, it meant one god was offended. If summer lasted too long, another had refused to step aside. Looking at the snow creeping closer, you can almost believe it. You help carry baskets of gathered crops back to the settlement. The wind now cuts straight through your clothing, making each step feel like trudging through invisible needles. By the time you return, your face is numb. People hurry to take the baskets inside, sorting everything with urgency. As evening approaches, the cold deepens. Every household prepares fires, piling wood and dry dung into pits and lighting sparks. Smoke rises everywhere, filling the air with a thick, earthy haze. You sit close to your fire, extending your hands toward the flames, savoring every bit of warmth. The meal tonight is simple grain porridge, thickened with bits of vegetables you managed to collect. It's plain, heavy, and comforting in that ancient way of barely enough, but it helps. You eat slowly, letting the warmth spread through your chest. After dinner, you join a small gathering where elders debate what the early freeze might mean. Some insist it's a warning. Others say it's just nature's unpredictability. Someone claims animals have been behaving strangely for weeks, which must mean something. Historians still debate whether ancient weather predictions were superstition or early observational science. But when your life depends on reading signs, everything becomes meaningful. You wrap your cloak tightly around your shoulders and step outside again. The moon glows through thin clouds, Frost sparkles on the rooftops. You can see your breath clearly now. The air smells like cold stone and smoke. Children have gone to sleep early, bundled in layers of whatever fabric their families could gather. Adults sit closer to the fires, talking quietly, planning, worrying. You tilt your head back and stare at the sky. The stars shimmer faintly, distant and cold. You feel suddenly small, a single human trying to keep warm in a world that never promised comfort. The season isn't just weather here, it's fate. It decides your work, your food, your sleep, your health. It decides whether your settlement thrives or starves, whether next year's stories begin with hope or tragedy. As you crawl onto your mat and pull your rough blanket over your shoulders, you feel the chill seep through the walls. You shiver, curl your knees closer to your chest, and try to imagine warm seasons, green fields, soft breeze, sunlight that doesn't bite. But ancient life doesn't give you guarantees. Only the promise that tomorrow will come, and you'll face whatever the season decides. You said, ChatGPT said, you wake to the kind of ache that feels older than you are, not from cold this time, not from fear, not from sleepless nights, but from the simple weight of using your body as your only tool every single day. Before you even sit up, your hands throb faintly, your shoulders crack, and your legs protest like overworked beasts of burden. In ancient civilizations, tools aren't things that make tasks easier. They're things that allow tasks to exist at all, and you, unfortunately, are the engine that powers them. As you step outside, the world is already awake, with metallic clanks, wooden thuds, and the rhythmic scratch of sharpening stones. People gather near the communal workspace, each holding something worn down by yesterday, a hoe with a cracked handle, a sickle with a dull edge, a chisel missing a sliver of metal, a basket frame that needs repairing. You join them, because your life depends on tools, and your tools depend entirely on you. You pick up your own set, a simple wooden hoe, its handle smooth from years of gripping, its blade chipped at the edges. As you run your fingers over the floors, you feel something familiar, frustration mixed with resignation. Tools here are precious, but they also break, warp, dull, splinter, bend, and occasionally decide to betray you at the worst possible moment. A mainstream historical fact slips into your thoughts. Before industrialization, nearly every tool was handmade from wood, bone, stone, bronze, or early iron. Nothing came out of a uniform mold. Nothing matched perfectly. Everything required constant repair and understanding. You kneel beside an older man who sharpens blades for the community. He hands you a stone rough, heavy, worn smooth in the center from years of use. You pull your blade across it again and again. The scraping sounds slow, gritty, rhythmic. Sparks do not fly dramatically like in movies. Instead, the metal grinds stubbornly, releasing a faint smell of old dust and heat. It's tedious work, but satisfying in a strangely meditative way. Every stroke feels like convincing the metal to work with you instead of against you. As you sharpen, you watch others nearby. Someone rewinds a basket frame using thin reeds, weaving them so tightly you can barely see the gaps. Another person chips away at a block of stone, shaping it into a grinding tool. A woman repairs a broken loom, fingers moving with precise, practiced motions. No one wastes anything. Even splintered wood finds a second life as kindling. Broken pots become drainage pieces in gardens. Frayed ropes get rewoven into smaller cords. Historians still argue whether ancient people were incredibly resourceful or simply had no choice but to be. Looking around, you lean toward the latter. Necessity is the greatest teacher. When your tool is sharp enough to at least pretend it's new, you head to the fields. There, you see exactly why strength matters. Every tool demands your entire body. You lift the hoe, swing it down, crack the soil, pull, swing again, crack again. There is no button to press, no engine to do the work. Just you, the tool, and the endless earth. Your hands blister easily, even with calluses that have built up over months. Sweat drips down your forehead as the sun climbs higher. The weight of the tool isn't enormous, but repeating the same motion hundreds of times burns your muscles until they feel like warm clay being molded into something else entirely. A stone catches the edge of your hoe, jolting the shock deep into your wrist. You curse under your breath, check for damage, and continue. Tools don't care about your pain. Earth doesn't care about your exhaustion. Beside you, a younger worker struggles with a wooden plough pulled by an uncooperative goat, a partnership doomed from the moment it began. The goat keeps stopping to chew on plants it absolutely should not be eating. The plough keeps getting stuck. The worker keeps sighing dramatically. You can't help but laugh quietly. A quirky historical tidbit comes to mind. In some ancient communities, people believed animals responded better to songs, so farmers would hum while working to keep goats, oxen, or donkeys focused. You try humming. The goat looks at you like you've offended its ancestors. You stop humming. By midday, your arms feel like they're made of sand. Your back screams. Your legs wobble. But the work continues. You switch tools from hoe to hand rake, from rake to digging stick, from digging stick to small blade for trimming roots. Each tool has its own weight, its own quirks, its own stubbornness. As you kneel to cut away weeds, your small blade slips. You nick your finger. It's not deep, but it stings terribly. You suck on the wound instinctively. The healer nearby shakes her head and hands you a bitter-smelling plant leaf to press against it. You thank her, embarrassed. Ancient tools don't just strain your muscles, they bite you, scrape you, bruise you, cut you, and remind you constantly that pain is part of the job. By late afternoon, the tools start to feel heavier, not physically, just spiritually. You notice every flaw in them. You notice the tiny crack forming near the handle. You notice the dullness creeping back. You notice how much your survival depends on these imperfect objects shaped by imperfect hands. Someone calls you over to help build a new fence. You grab a hammering stone and begin driving pegs into the ground. Each strike sends vibrations up your arm. The stone slips twice, hitting your knuckles. You hiss in pain. The man beside you simply nods, as if to say, "Yep, that's how it is." By the time evening arrives, your body is trembling with exhaustion. Your hands feel swollen. Your back aches in places you didn't know existed. You carry your tools home gently, respectfully, because despite everything, they kept you alive another day. Sitting by the fire later, you polish the metal blade with a scrap of cloth. You run your thumb along the edge carefully. It will be dull again by tomorrow. It always dulls. Everything here wears down tools, bodies, people. Hope yet everything gets repaired, sharpened, rebuilt. Ancient civilizations survive because humans bend until they almost break, then somehow keep going. As you lie down to sleep, the weight of every tool you touch lingers in your bones. You close your eyes and let the exhaustion sink into the mat beneath you. Tomorrow, your body will hurt again. Tomorrow, the tools will need you again. Tomorrow, you will pick them up anyway. And continue. You wake the next morning with a strange stillness in the air, the kind that makes you pause at your doorway before stepping outside. There's no shouting, no clanking of tools yet, no urgent chatter. Instead, the village feels muted, like everyone woke up carrying the same heavy thought. And it doesn't take long to understand why. Word has spread quietly, travelling from house to house like smoke slipping through cracks. The ruler's messengers were seen on the far road last evening, and whenever messengers appear, life changes. You step outside and see people gathered in small circles, speaking in low, uneasy voices. No one knows exactly what the news will be, but everyone knows it rarely brings anything good. Taxes raised, labour demanded, soldiers recruited, land redistributed. Ancient rulers don't send messengers to offer encouragement. They send them to take something. You walk toward the communal area, your stomach tight. Even the animals seem on edge. Goats bleat anxiously. The dog paces near the entrance. A crow sits on a fence post, staring like it knows drama is coming. A mainstream historical fact rises in your thoughts. In ancient civilizations, rulers had enormous influence over ordinary people's lives. Their decisions shaped laws, labor, food supply, taxes, religious practices, even daily behavior. And ordinary people, like you, had practically no voice in those decisions. You hear footsteps before you see the messengers. They approach wearing travelling cloaks, dust from long roads clinging to their hems. One carries a carved staff that marks official authority. People bow their heads, not out of respect but out of survival. The lead messenger unrolls a sealed tablet or parchment, depending on your civilization, and begins to speak loudly enough for the entire settlement to hear. His voice is steady, practiced, almost bored. He's done this 1,000 times before, But to you, every word lands like a blow. New taxes, increased grain quotas, mandatory Labour Day next month for repairing the ruler's canal or road or temple, the details barely matter. What matters is that it means more work, less food, and no choice. A few people gasp quietly. Others mutter under their breath. One elder's shoulders slump visibly. You feel a heaviness settle in your ribcage. You already work from sunrise to moonrise. How much more can the ruler possibly take from you? When the messenger finishes, he waits silently for questions he knows no one will ask. Then he announces a second decree, one you didn't expect. A request for young workers or fighters for the ruler's service. Maybe a distant battle. Maybe a large construction project. Maybe simply filling quotas of bodies to be used however the palace decides. The silence that follows is absolute. Children cling to their parents. Parents exchange terrified glances. A young man nearby swallows hard, trying to appear brave while his fingers tremble. Historians still argue whether ancient rulers were genuinely divinely appointed leaders, or simply powerful figures who learned how to control fear. But from where you stand, it doesn't feel like debate. It feels like fact. They hold the power. You endure it. The messengers leave after delivering their demands. Their departure brings no relief, only the echo of uncertainty. The entire settlement feels as though it's holding its breath. You walk back to your tasks, but everything feels heavier: tools, baskets, even the air. You're not angry, just tired. Tired of rulers who live far away in stone palaces, eating seasoned meat while you chew on gritty grain mush. Tired of decisions made by people who never see the fields they demand tribute from. Near the fields, you overhear an older woman telling a younger one that rulers are like storms, distant until the moment they arrive, and impossible to avoid. Someone else spits on the ground and mutters that rulers never visit unless they want something. You can't disagree. You join others repairing irrigation ditches, your hands moving automatically while your mind drifts. What if the ruler's soldiers come back? What if they take someone you know? What if next year they demand double? There's no stability, only the illusion of it. As you work, someone beside you shares a quirky historical tidbit. In some ancient kingdoms, people believed rulers carried divine blood, that their words shaped reality, and their anger caused natural disasters. You snort softly, earning a half smile from them. Whether or not rulers are divine, their influence certainly feels like a force of nature. By afternoon, tension spreads like dust in the wind. Even small disagreements feel sharper. People snap at each other, then apologize quickly. Everyone is unsettled because when rulers demand more, it means your margin for error shrinks. Mistakes become dangerous. Later in the day, an elder calls everyone to the communal fire. It's time to decide how the settlement will meet the new demands. Grain quotas are assigned. Labor groups are formed. Volunteers or volunteers chosen by necessity step forward for the ruler's conscription request. You watch as a few young men stand with stiff spines, their families wearing expressions that mix pride and dread. Ancient leadership isn't just distant rulers. It's also these elders, the ones who carry the burden of translating royal demands into practical survival. You can see the stress in their eyes. They're trying to hold the village together while a distant authority squeezes from above. The meeting continues until the sun sinks. By the time tasks are decided, people look worn out, their faces drawn. You head home slowly, feeling the weight of the ruler's shadow stretching across the land. Later, as you lie on your mat, staring at the dark outline of the ceiling beams, you can't help thinking about how fragile your world is. One decision from someone you've never met can change your entire year, your entire life. But the world keeps turning. You will wake tomorrow. You will work. You will bend so your community doesn't break. Because that's ancient life, enduring decisions made by powerful strangers while finding the strength to survive anyway. And somewhere deep inside, you hope the ruler forgets about your village. At least for a while. You wake the next morning with a strange quiet in your chest. The kind that makes you think of things you usually avoid thinking about. Maybe it's the messenger's visit yesterday. Maybe it's the cold still clinging to the air. Maybe it's the old man you saw sitting alone near the fire last night, staring into the flames like he could see something on the other side of them. Whatever the reason, today feels heavier. Not with fear, but with reflection. In ancient civilizations, death isn't a distant possibility. It's a neighbor, a shadow that sits at the edge of your vision. People don't whisper about it to avoid it, they speak of it as naturally as they speak of weather or harvest. Because here, where sickness, hunger, storms, and rulers can change everything in a blink, you're never allowed to forget how thin the line between life and afterlife is. You walk through the village and notice offerings placed near thresholds, a bowl of grain, a small carving, a smudge of soot marking a doorway. People say these things keep wandering spirits calm or guide ancestors back home. You see an elder sprinkle water along the ground as she mutters a prayer under her breath. She doesn't stop when you walk by. She doesn't explain. She doesn't need to. Rituals exist here without justification. They're as old as the soil. As you help carry firewood to the communal area, someone mentions that one of the shepherds found an abandoned amulet near the hills, carved bone shaped into a tiny human face. Immediately, a group gathers around to examine it. Some say it belongs to a traveler. Others say it's a spirit's calling token. Someone quietly insists it should be buried at the boundary of the settlement before nightfall, or restless ones may follow. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Most ancient cultures believed the dead remained connected to the living, watching, guiding, protecting, or warning. The boundary between worlds wasn't a brick wall. It was a thin veil people felt constantly brushing against their daily lives. Later, while tending to tasks near the fields, you overhear two elders discussing a burial from years ago, how they placed grain, tools, and a small toy beside the deceased. The idea wasn't sentimental. It was practical. People believed the dead needed supplies for their journey into the next world. You find yourself wondering what you would want placed beside you. A knife? Bread? A warm cloak? Probably all of them. As the morning warms, you join others near the pottery area, where a healer prepares a mixture of incense. The smell is sharp, earthy, and oddly soothing. She explains it's for a ritual later someone's grandmother passed the previous night. The tone of her voice isn't sad exactly. It's respectful, steady, accepting. Here, grief mixes with routine. Death isn't a tragedy every time. Sometimes it's simply the closing of a circle everyone knows by heart. A group gathers in the afternoon for the ritual. You join quietly, standing among others near the edge of the settlement. The family places bundles of herbs and woven cloth at a small stone altar. The healer chants softly, her voice rising and falling like a slow tide. People bow their heads. The air feels heavier, but not frightening, more like full. Historians still argue whether ancient funerary rituals were symbolic expressions of respect or literal preparations for an afterlife journey. But listening to the chants, feeling the weight of silence, you understand something. These rituals aren't really meant to help the dead. They're meant to help the living keep going. After the ritual ends, you walk back slowly with a few others. One man talks about dreams, how ancestors visit him with warnings or blessings. A woman says she once saw the silhouette of her mother in the fields at dawn after her passing. No one mocks these stories. No one questions them. In a world full of uncertainty, believing the dead stay near is a comfort most people desperately need. A quirky historical tidbit surfaces. In some ancient civilizations, people placed coins or beads in the mouth of the deceased to pay passage across a mythical river into the next world. You wonder if such a river exists, and if so, how far away it flows. Evening falls, bringing with it the soft glow of dozens of small fires. You sit alone for a moment, staring at the flames and thinking about your own place in this world. Your own thinness, your own fragility, your own tiny mark on the vast canvas of human existence. Death here isn't feared in the modern sense. It's understood, it's expected, it's woven into every choice. Later, as you lie on your mat, you listen to the quiet breathing of your community, lives stacked beside each other like stones forming a wall. You stare up at the rafters and wonder what your ancestors would say if they were here. Would they offer comfort? Advice? Warnings? In this world, the afterlife isn't a distant concept. It's right beside you, in the stories, in the rituals, in the firelight, in the silence between heartbeats. And tonight, you feel that presence more clearly than ever. Not frightening, not cold, but steady. A reminder that even in the brutal reality of ancient life, you never truly walk alone. You wake the next morning to a strange smell in the air. Not unpleasant, not dangerous, just different. Damp earth, smoke drifting from early fires, and something sharper, something metallic carried by the breeze. When you step outside, the world feels tense in a way that isn't about storms or raiders or rulers. This tension comes from the earth itself, because today reminds you of something ancient people knew intimately. Nature doesn't ask permission before rewriting your entire life. The ground beneath your feet feels firmer than usual, almost swollen. You walk slowly toward the fields, feeling tiny vibrations in your ankles. At first, you think it's in your imagination, maybe tired limbs, maybe morning stiffness. But then you see it in the faces of others. People stop mid-step. They glance down. They listen. The earth lets out a long, low groan. Not a dramatic crack. Not a quake that knocks you over. Just a warning breath. You exchange uncertain looks with the people around you. In ancient times, without modern science, tiny shifts like this feel like messages from the land, the gods, or something deeper. A mainstream historical fact rises in your mind. Ancient civilizations experienced earthquakes, floods, fires, and droughts constantly, but had no scientific understanding of why they happened. Everything was interpreted through myth, ritual, and fear, because when the world moves beneath your feet, explanations don't make you safer. You kneel in the field to check the soil, but it feels wrong, too loose in some places, too packed in others. You hear a distant thud, not a footstep, something larger falling, maybe a rock slide in the hills. Someone shouts for people to gather near the central area. You follow quickly, your heartbeat picking up. A worry twists in your stomach, the kind that says you're too small for the world you live in. People assemble. An elder lifts a hand for silence. He says the earth has been restless for days, though none of you noticed. Animals have been uneasy. The river level rose unexpectedly 2 nights ago. Birds changed their migration pattern. And now, the ground murmurs beneath you. He doesn't name the danger, he doesn't have to. Everyone already feels it. You move with a group to inspect the homes along the outer edge of the settlement. One wall has cracked slightly. Thin, but real. A sign of stress. People reinforce it quickly, stuffing mud and straw, shoring the beams, muttering protective prayers. Historians still argue whether ancient people used superstition as emotional coping or as practical early warning systems. Watching everyone work with trembling hands yet steady movements, you suspect it was both. As midday approaches, the weather shifts abruptly. The wind changes direction. Clouds gather fast, not dark storm clouds, but heavy, swollen ones, dragging shadows across the ground. You hear the river rushing louder than usual. You walk closer and see the water churning, slamming against the banks, tugging at roots and reeds. Flood, maybe small, maybe devastating. You have no way of knowing. People rush to lift storage pots onto higher platforms. Tools get dragged inside homes. Children are hustled away from the river. The air crackles with fear, but also with a grim understanding. Ancient life doesn't allow hesitation. When nature moves, you move faster. The first surge comes quietly, a ripple that spills over the bank, dark and swirling. You wade in with others, stacking rocks and mud to slow the water. Your feet sink into cold earth. Your clothes cling to your legs. Water pushes harder, as if testing your strength. The river doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care what you need. A quirky historical tidbit floats into your mind as you work. Some ancient communities believed rivers were living beings with moods, hungry, angry, generous, unpredictable. Looking at the frothing water, you understand why. By late afternoon, the water stabilizes, but barely. Everyone is soaked, exhausted, shaking. You sit on a rock, breathing hard, watching debris float downstream branches, leaves, maybe someone's basket swept away. The land hums softly beneath your feet again, as if the earth is clearing its throat before speaking. You feel small, vulnerable, and strangely connected to every person beside you. Nature doesn't just threaten you, it binds you together. As evening settles, the danger hasn't passed, but it has paused. People gather near the fire, dripping water, mud streaked up their legs, faces pale with the stress of the day. No one speaks loudly. Some stare at the flames. Some stare at the ground. Some stare at the river in the distance, waiting, listening. You eat a small meal, bread damp from the air, vegetables boiled into a thick, earthy mash. It fills your stomach, but not your fear. You hear elders debating quietly, whether the land is angry, whether a quake is coming, whether the snows will melt too fast this year. You lie down on your mat later, still wearing damp clothes because you're too tired to change. The walls creak, the ground sighs again, faint but real. You close your eyes, knowing ancient people never truly slept during nights like this. You listen to the earth, the river, the wind, all of them alive, all of them capable of reshaping your world by morning. Here, nature isn't a backdrop, it's the author of your life, and tonight, you pray silently that it chooses not to rewrite the next chapter. You wake to the sound of footsteps outside, slow, heavy, dragging just a little. When you step out of your home, you see him. One of the traveling craftsmen who passes through your region only a few times a year. His clothes are worn, his beard tangled, and his pack looks heavier than any single person should carry. But everyone greets him with respect, even admiration. In ancient civilizations, traveling specialists are rare treasures. They bring skills your settlement doesn't have: metalworking techniques, pottery styles, dyes, carving methods, repairs only trained hands can do. They're the closest thing to technology updates, wandering from place to place instead of appearing on screens. You watch as people slowly gather around him, forming a loose circle. He smiles, sets his pack down, and begins unwrapping bundles: chisels, tiny hammers, carving knives, bronze scraps, polished stones, bone tools, cords dyed with minerals, even a few small figurines shaped from clay. Children gasp softly. Adults lean forward. You step closer, drawn by curiosity. The craftsman's hands are calloused but precise as he lays out his items on a woven mat. Without a word, he starts working, fixing a chipped pot, reshaping a broken hook, sharpening a dull blade. His movements are smooth, steady, practiced. Watching him feels like watching someone coax life back into objects everyone else gave up on. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Most ancient communities relied on traveling artisans to bring new knowledge or maintain specialized tools, since not every settlement had its own metalworker, potter, or carver. These people carried culture, communication, and innovation on their backs. You bring him your own small knife, the one you worked so hard to trade for at the market days ago. He examines it, taps the metal lightly, nods, and begins to sharpen it with a stone you've never seen before. Darker, denser, probably from far-off hills. Each stroke makes the blade gleam a little brighter. He gestures for you to hold it. You do. It feels smoother, lighter somehow, more obedient to your hand. You thank him with a small bow. He taps your arm in a friendly way and moves on. Nearby, the craftsman begins repairing a fishing spear for an older man. The entire village watches because repair is also learning. As he works, he explains small things: how to bind fibers tighter, how to angle a blade so it doesn't crack, how to heat a stone before shaping it so it doesn't explode from hidden moisture. People listen closely, absorbing every word as if the knowledge itself is a gift. You notice, too, how much news he carries. Between repairs, he shares stories. A distant river that flooded badly, a ruler in another region who built a great stone hall, a village that discovered a new type of clay perfect for pots, rumors of merchants bringing colourful stones from mountains far beyond anything you've seen. The settlement hangs on every detail. This is how the ancient world stays connected, not through letters or broadcasts, but through wandering hands and wandering stories. Later, he pulls out a small pile of strange objects, amulets carved from bone, beads with holes drilled through, tiny stone animals, smooth discs with symbols etched on them. He explains that some are protective, some mark family lines, some are used in rituals, and some he doesn't fully understand himself. He just knows people want them. A quirky historical tidbit surfaces in your thought. Craftsmen like this sometimes spread artistic styles across massive distances without intending to, simply because someone liked a design and asked them to recreate it. That's how patterns travelled faster than armies. Children gather closest when he pulls out a small whistle carved from reed. He blows it softly, producing a bird-like note. They stare wide-eyed, their mouths open. You can't help smiling at their wonder. A simple sound becomes magic in a world without instruments beyond the basics. In the afternoon, villagers bring food as payment grain, fruit, dried meat, a warm drink. The craftsman accepts gratefully. Payment here isn't coin, it's trust, respect, and nourishment. You sit nearby, listening as he describes where he's headed next. A settlement beyond the hills is building a new meeting hall and needs carved beams. Another wants metal nails for a roof. Another simply wants stories. As evening approaches, he sets up a small teaching circle. A few young people gather with tools in hand, hoping to learn. You join them, sitting cross-legged as he demonstrates how to carve grooves in wood without splitting it. His voice is patient. His hands move slowly so you can follow every detail. You try the technique yourself and immediately carve too deep, leaving an uneven scar in the wood. He laughs softly, not unkindly, and corrects your grip. You try again. Better this time. Still clumsy, but better. Learning from him feels like touching a wider world, one that stretches beyond your settlement's boundaries, beyond the fields and hills, beyond everything you know. It reminds you that even in a harsh ancient life, people are constantly inventing, improving, sharing. Progress happens one traveling craftsman at a time. Night falls. The craftsman sleeps in the communal house, his tools carefully bundled at his side like loyal companions. People talk quietly about what they learned, what they saw, what they hope he'll bring next time. As you lie on your mat, you think about the knife he sharpened, the stories he carried, the skills he shared. You picture him traveling by moonlight tomorrow, heading toward another weary settlement that needs repair and connection. Ancient life is brutal, yes, but in moments like this, it feels filled with sparks, tiny sparks carried by wandering hands, keeping the darkness from swallowing everything. You said, ChatGPT said, you wake to a sound you haven't heard in a long while, distant voices echoing from the hills, rhythmic and rising, carrying a strange layered harmony. When you step outside, a few others are already staring toward the source of the sound, eyebrows raised, mouths slightly open. Travelers again, but not traders this time. Not craftsmen, not soldiers. These are storytellers, performers, wanderers who carry culture, memory, and emotion the way others carry baskets of grain. In ancient civilizations, entertainment isn't a constant part of life. It arrives like unpredictable weather. Sometimes months pass with nothing but work and worry. And then one day, suddenly, you hear singing drifting across the landscape and everyone knows the storytellers are here. They enter the settlement slowly, wrapped in layered fabrics, dyed colors you rarely see, burnt orange, dusty blue, soft crimson. They carry instruments made of wood, hide, and bone. One holds a drum shaped like a half bowl. Another has a long flute with carved patterns spiraling around it. A third carries a stringed instrument with uneven tuning that somehow feels comforting. People gather immediately. Even elders who rarely leave their homes step outside. Children practically bounce with excitement. These travelers bring not goods, but worlds. One storyteller bows dramatically, sweeping their arm in an exaggerated arc. The children giggle. Then the performers begin setting up a small space, not a stage, just a cleared patch of earth, and place a few stones around it to mark their boundary. A simple circle, but it feels sacred somehow. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind. Ancient oral storytellers were the memory, keepers of their societies. They preserved history, myth, genealogy, and laws through performance long before writing became common. The drum starts first. A soft, steady thump-thump, like a heartbeat. Then the flute joins, long haunting notes that ripple through the air. The crowd falls completely silent, as if someone pressed a hand to everyone's lips at once. The lead storyteller steps into the circle. Their voice is rich deep when it needs to be, high when the story lifts, sharp when danger appears. They shift their stance for each character. A proud warrior, a frightened child, a jealous king, a river spirit who speaks in riddles. You don't just hear the story. You see it, feel it. Dust becomes desert sand. Smoke becomes battlefield haze. The angles of their body become mountains, storms, forests. Children lean forward until they're practically falling into the circle. Adults try to hide their smiles but fail. They tell a tale of a hunter who chased a mythical stag into the clouds. Another about a trickster fox who stole fire from the gods. Another about a woman who crossed the sea on a wooden bowl, guided by stars that didn't exist anymore. Every story feels older than the soil beneath your feet. You remember something, a quirky historical tidbit that some storytellers trained for years under mentors, memorizing thousands of lines, perfecting performance until their voices could make people laugh, cry, or feel fear with just a shift in breath. Watching this group, you believe it completely. After the stories, a performer invites the children into the circle to mimic animal movements. Kids crawl like crabs, flap like birds, stomp like bison. Laughter erupts. Even the adults chuckle when one child insists they are a river spirit and proceeds to wiggle violently across the dirt. Next comes music. A rhythm-heavy song meant to summon courage, another meant to honor ancestors, another meant purely to make people dance. And dance they do, arms flung out, feet stomping dust clouds into the air, faces glowing with joy that feels almost rare in a world shaped by hardship. As night falls, the performers shift into quieter tales, stories about the stars. A woman with silver hair explains constellations using a stick to draw shapes in the dirt. She talks about heroes who became stars, animals who fled into the sky, spirits who still watch over you from above. People gaze upward, squinting, trying to match her drawings with the glittering points above. Historians still argue whether ancient constellations were meant as calendars or moral lessons. But here, listening to the storyteller speak about the star that guides lost travelers home, you understand why stories mattered more than explanations. Eventually, the performers unpack their small collection of crafted objects, carved wooden animals, painted pebbles, tiny woven charms. These aren't goods for trade, but tokens of stories. People exchange grain or cloth for them anyway, not because they need them, but because they want to hold a piece of the story in their hands. You choose a small spiral carved into a bead. The storyteller explains it represents journeys outward, inward, and back again. You hold it tightly, feeling the grooves beneath your thumb. By the time the performance ends, the settlement feels warmer, brighter, fuller. The worries of yesterday, rulers, storms, sickness, hunger haven't vanished, but they've loosened their grip for a few precious hours. You walk home slowly, replaying the stories in your mind. Your body is tired, but in a different way, the good kind of tiredness that comes after laughter and emotion, not after fear or labor. Lying on your mat, you hold the spiral bead to your chest and stare at the ceiling. You can still hear the faint echo of the drum in your ears. In ancient life, beauty arrives rarely and briefly, but when it comes, it stays inside you for a long time. You wake before sunrise to the sound of rustling outside, not animals, not wind, but people gathering with a kind of focused urgency. When you step out, rubbing sleep from your eyes, you see a group already assembled near the outer edge of the settlement. They carry baskets, digging sticks, coils of rope, and bundles of cloth. No one is smiling. No one is speaking loudly. This isn't a celebration or a ritual. This is labor that keeps the entire settlement alive, gathering essential resources from the wild. In ancient civilizations, wild landscapes weren't places you visited for adventure. They were supermarkets without signs, pharmacies without jars, hardware stores without labels, but also filled with dangers, accidents, and creatures who did not care how badly you needed something. You join the group because everyone must, eventually. If you don't help gather, people remember. And if you do help, you might bring back something your household desperately needs. The group sets out, just as the sun begins to stain the horizon with pale gold. You walk along narrow dirt paths that curve through tall grasses and clusters of low shrubs. You hear insects chirping in waves, like the land itself is humming. For a moment, it feels peaceful, until you remember how unpredictable the wilderness can be. A mainstream historical fact rises in your thoughts. Most ancient settlements relied heavily on foraging alongside farming. Even with crops and livestock, wild plants, stones, clay, reeds and wood remain necessary for medicine, tools, shelter, baskets, binding, dyes and food supplements. Your destination today is the forest just beyond the hills, dense, shadowed, cool. The moment you step beneath the canopy, the temperature drops and the sounds change. Bird calls echo strangely. Twigs snap under your feet. The air smells of moss and damp earth. Everyone splits into small groups based on what they're collecting. Some head toward the marshy area for reeds. Others go deeper for medicinal herbs. A few climb the rocky slope for specific stones. You join a group searching for resin, bark, and sturdy branches for repairs. The forest feels alive in a way the settlement never does. You stay alert, scanning for anything that moves too fast or too quietly. Historians still debate whether ancient people feared the wilderness or respected it. But watching your group move carefully and whisper warnings, it's obvious. They did both. You find a tree with resin leaking down the bark like thick amber tears. You scrape it gently with a small tool into a clay container. Resin helps waterproof baskets, seal cracks in pottery, even treat minor wounds when mixed with herbs. Every drop feels valuable. Nearby, a woman gathers bark strips for weaving. She works silently, movements practiced. When a twig snaps sharply behind her, she stiffens. Everyone does. Your heart jumps as you turn, half expecting a predator. But it's just a deer darting away, startled by your presence. You laugh quietly at yourself. But the woman scolds you with her eyes. Noise attracts attention, and not always the gentle kind. You move deeper, stepping carefully around exposed roots. The forest floor is uneven, covered in leaf litter that hides holes perfect for twisting ankles. One of the younger boys trips and curses before immediately clamping a hand over his mouth. His father grabs his arm, whispering an old rule. Keep quiet, keep alert. A quirky historical tidbit drifts into your mind. In some ancient societies, people left small offerings when entering forests, bits of bread, flowers, or even a few drops of water, believing it kept woodland spirits from becoming hostile. Looking around at the dark corners between trees, you almost wish you'd done that today. As the group gathers bark and resin, someone calls for help, a woman trying to reach a patch of herbs growing on a steep slope. You climb with two others, gripping roots and rocks. The herbs are tiny and bright green, smelling sharp and medicinal. They help with fever. They're rare. You pick them carefully, placing them into a woven pouch. You slip once on the way down, sliding on loose soil, your heart jumping into your throat. Someone grabs your arm just in time. You nod in thanks, breath shaky. Out here, one fall can be the difference between making it home or becoming a sad story whispered around the fire. By midday, the baskets are filling. Resin, bark, fibers, wild onions, roots, smooth stones, reeds from the marsh, berries carefully gathered by those who know which won't kill you. You chew on a few nuts someone passes around, savouring the earthy taste. The walk back is harder, baskets heavier, bodies tired, the sun higher and more aggressive. Someone spots fresh claw marks on a tree, and everyone quietly picks up the pace. The wilderness doesn't feel like a friend anymore. It feels like a place that tolerated you just long enough. When you finally reach the settlement, the relief is almost overwhelming. People greet you, eager to see what you've brought. Resin goes to potters, bark to weavers, herbs to the healer, stones to tool makers, reeds to basket weavers. Everything finds a purpose. You sit down, exhausted, letting your aching shoulders relax. The wild demands strength, intuition, and luck. And today, you had just enough of each. As evening falls, people share stories of past foraging trips. Someone once chased by a boar, someone who got lost for half a day, someone who found a beautiful stone that brought good harvest luck. You listen, laughing, wincing, shaking your head. Then you lie down on your mat, feeling dirt still clinging to your skin and the forest's chill still in your bones. In ancient life, nature provides, but only to those willing to walk into its teeth and ask politely. And today, you walked back with full baskets instead of empty hands. You wake to a sky that looks strangely washed out, pale, flat, almost colourless. A sky that usually means something important is happening far beyond your small world. And you soon realize what it is when you see a group of unfamiliar travelers heading toward the settlement. Not traders, not performers, not messengers. These people walk differently. They move slowly, carefully, looking around with wide eyes, hands gripping bundles close to their chests. Their clothes are patched, their faces sunburnt and tired. You hear whispers spreading, even before the group reaches the center. Refugees, survivors, people fleeing something. In ancient civilizations, people on the move rarely wander without reason. War, famine, drought, illness, a collapsed village, a failed harvest. The world doesn't care if you can't stay where you are. It simply pushes you out. The group enters cautiously, scanning every face as if searching for danger or mercy. A young woman carries a child on her hip, wrapped tightly. An older man limps with the help of a broken staff. A boy no older than 10 holds a clay jar like it's the most valuable thing he owns. Maybe it is. Your settlement gathers around them in a loose half-circle. Not threatening, not welcoming, just watching. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind. Ancient communities often encountered displaced groups, and their reactions could be anything from compassion to suspicion. Every stranger brought labor and skills, but also risk, mouths to feed, and stories of danger that might follow. The group's leader, a man with hollow cheeks but steady eyes, steps forward and bows. He explains in a rough, tired voice that their settlement to the east suffered a season of impossible drought, followed by a fire that swept through the dry fields. They lost everything. Homes, tools, grain, even the well dried up. They have walked for days. His words hit the crowd heavily. A murmur moves through your people. You glance at the elders. Their expressions shift through sympathy, caution, calculation. The unspoken truth is simple and cruel. You don't have much either. Letting more people join means stretching resources thinner, but turning them away means condemning them to die. Historians still argue whether ancient communities leaned more towards survival, selfishness, or collective compassion. Standing here now, you see how blurry that line really is. An elder steps forward and begins asking quiet questions. How many of you are healthy? Do you have any animals left? Can you work? Do you know farming? Can you weave? Can you fight? These questions aren't insults. They're survival logistics. As the refugees answer, you notice the way the villagers react. Some nod approvingly at their skills. Some frown at the mention of injuries. One man whispers that too many new people might attract raiders. Another whispers back that rejecting desperate families will anger the gods. Nearby, the healer examines the refugees' wounds. Blistered feet, sunburned skin, a few infected cuts. Children cling to their parents, watching your settlement with frightened, hungry eyes. One little girl holds out a cracked wooden doll, as if offering it in exchange for safety. A quirky historical tidbit surfaces in your mind. Some ancient societies adopted outsiders easily because new hands meant more labor. Others created complex rituals to purify strangers before letting them stay. Your settlement chooses neither extreme. Instead, you begin with a meal. People bring bowls of thin porridge and leftover vegetables. Not a feast barely enough for comfort, but the refugees accept each bowl as if receiving treasure. They eat slowly, savoring every bite. You watch their shoulders loosen, their eyes soften, their hands stop shaking. Later, work begins. Refugees help repair fences, gather wood, fetch water, and clear debris. You guide a boy to the storage hut and show him how to sort dried herbs. He works quietly, carefully. You sense he's trying to prove himself. Some of your villagers warm to the newcomers quickly. Others keep their distance. But as the day goes on, something subtle shifts. Conversations start. Laughter flickers here and there, and pairs of strangers begin working together like they've done it for years. Still, not everything blends smoothly. A man argues over water rationing. A woman insists the newcomers shouldn't enter the deeper storage rooms. A child cries because she wants to keep her special stone, but another child from the refugee group already picked it up. Ancient communities run on cooperation, but cooperation doesn't magically appear. It has to be built, moment by moment, compromise by compromise. In the evening, everyone gathers around the fire. The refugees share stories of their lost village, of the fire that tore through dry fields like a living beast, of walking in darkness, guided only by starlight and hope. People listen in heavy silence. Some wipe their eyes, some try not to. You notice one of the newcomers producing a tiny flute made from a hollow reed. He plays a soft, trembling melody, sad, beautiful, cracked at the edges. Children from both groups sit together, leaning against one another, exhausted and unguarded. And for the first time today, you feel the shift in your chest, the realization that your world is bigger than your settlement, that your struggles are not unique, that suffering doesn't belong to just one group. When the refugees finally settle for the night, wrapped in borrowed blankets, You lie on your mat and think about how fragile every village is, how thin the line between settled and displaced truly is. Tomorrow, they may stay. Tomorrow, some may leave. Tomorrow, your settlement's future will look slightly different because new voices, new hands, new stories have entered its circle. In the brutal reality of ancient life, the world does not care if you are safe, but people sometimes do, and that makes survival possible. You said, ChatGPT said, you wake before dawn to the soft thudding of feet outside, not hurried, not panicked, just steady and purposeful. When you step out, blinking against the pale morning light, you see a group gathering near the center of the settlement, with torches, baskets, and a few protective charms tied around their necks. Today is not an ordinary day. Today is the day your entire community ventures into the sacred place. The one space everyone respects, everyone fears, and no one enters without reason. The ancestral grounds. In ancient civilizations, the spiritual landscape isn't separate from daily life. It is daily life. Mountains watch you, rivers judge you, trees whisper warnings, and certain places, caves, groves, springs, ancient stones carry a weight so deep and old that even the bravest person walks around them, not through them. You join the group slowly, feeling an uneasy flutter in your stomach. Only a few times each year does the community visit the sacred grounds. It's a place people avoid unless guided by elders, a place that holds stories older than memory, older than the settlement itself. You walk together along the narrow path, the forest on either side strangely quiet. Birds don't sing here. Even the wind seems to move softer, as if afraid to disturb whatever watches from the shadows. Someone at the front sprinkles ground herbs along the trail, muttering a quiet prayer to ensure safe passage. Children are not allowed on this journey. Only adults who understand the gravity of silence walk here. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your thoughts. Many ancient cultures treated specific natural locations as portals between the human world and the spirit world, thresholds where ancestors could hear you more clearly and where the living were expected to tread lightly. After a long walk, you reach the clearing. It's a circle of tall stones arranged in a pattern no one alive remembers building. Each stone stands weathered and ancient, covered in moss but still imposing. The air feels heavy, like it's pressing down gently on your chest. Even the sunlight seems muted inside this circle. People spread out immediately, sweeping the ground, lighting incense bundles, placing offerings of grain, woven mats, carved wood, dried flowers. You set down your own offering, a small piece of bread saved from yesterday's meal. You hope it's enough. An elder begins to speak in a low voice, telling the story of how the ancestors first settled this land, guided by signs they believed came from spirits residing in these very stones. You've heard the story many times, but here, in this circle, it feels different, alive, almost sentient. Then the rituals begin. People kneel, hands touching the earth. Others tie pieces of cloth to branches as symbolic wishes. A few sit quietly with closed eyes, listening to whatever the land has to say. The air is thick with incense, the smell earthy and sharp. Suddenly, faintly, the ground trembles. Not like the earlier quakes you've felt. This one feels rhythmic, almost like a pulse. The group freezes. Some bow their heads. Others place their palms flat on the soil, whispering prayers. Historians still debate whether such rituals were emotional, communal therapy, or genuine attempts to communicate with unseen forces. Standing here, you don't care about scholarly arguments. The emotion is real. The connection is real. The quiet is alive. As the trembling fades, the elder announces it as a sign, one of acknowledgement, maybe approval. A breath of relief passes through the group. You move with others to clean a small spring at the edge of the clearing. The water trickles through smooth stones, clear and cold. People fill small jars, believing the spring's water carries blessings. You take a sip. It tastes like metal and earth, but your chest feels lighter afterward. A quirky historical tidbit surfaces in your memory. Some ancient people believed sacred springs could cure illnesses or reveal glimpses of the future if you watched the surface long enough. You stare at the ripples for a moment, wondering what your future might look like. It shows you nothing but shifting sunlight. As afternoon approaches, the final ritual begins, honoring the people who passed away this year. Names are spoken, offerings are placed. Tears fall quietly. Grief and gratitude braid together in the air. Then, just as the sun dips low, the elder instructs everyone to turn away and leave without looking back. A rule said to prevent spirits from following anyone home. You walk back silently, resisting the urge to glance over your shoulder. The forest feels different now, less heavy, more watchful than threatening. You clutch your water jar tightly, listening to the soft footsteps of your people. When you finally reach the settlement again, the normal sounds of daily life feel louder, warmer, safer. Children run between homes, laughter breaking the tension. Fires crackle, pots clatter, conversations start up again. You sit on the ground, breathing slowly, letting the ordinary world seep back into your bones. The sacred places of the ancient world remind you of something important. Even in a life filled with hunger, storms, sickness and danger, your ancestors believed there were forces bigger than all of it. Forces that watched, listened, guided, or warned. And today, you stood in the middle of that belief. You wake to a strange tightness in your chest. Not fear, not sickness, but something heavier, something that comes from the weight of decisions you didn't choose but must live with anyway. The settlement feels unsettled today. People speak with careful voices, the kind used when something must be done, even if no one actually wants to do it. When you step outside, a group is already forming near the central area. Elders sit close together, families stand behind them. Everyone's attention is focused on a single spot. A young man, trembling, eyes darting like a trapped animal. A dispute has reached its breaking point. In ancient civilizations, justice is not a distant institution with judges in robes. Justice lives inside the community, inside the people who must carry the consequences of every decision. And today, those consequences feel like stones pressing against your ribs. You move into the crowd quietly. A pot was broken, a boundary crossed, a promise broken. Everyone already knows the details, because secrets don't last long when you live close enough to hear each other breathe. The accused man stands alone. The family who brought the complaint stands opposite, tense and hurt. The elder in the middle raises his hand, and silence falls instantly. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your mind. Ancient communities used public disputes not just to punish, but to restore balance. A broken rule wasn't just an individual mistake, it threatened the harmony of everyone who depended on each other for survival. The elder speaks to both sides, asking for the truth, asking for witnesses. No shouting, no fighting, only raw honesty forced out into the light. But honesty in ancient life can be painful. The accused admits part of the story, not all. The family argues their side with trembling anger. A woman cries softly. A boy clutches his father's sleeve, frightened by the tension. People murmur, shake their heads, exchange quiet looks that say this is going to change things. Historians still debate whether ancient justice systems leaned more toward fairness or survival math. But watching the elders confer, whispering heavily, you can see the truth clearly. Justice here isn't about right or wrong. It's about what keeps the community whole. When the elder finally speaks, his voice is steady, weary, final. The young man must compensate the wronged family in grain, labor, and restored property. He will work for them until the next season's first harvest. He lowers his head, accepting, because refusing isn't an option. Refusal would mean exile, and exile, in the ancient world, is a slow death. The tension breaks, softly, unevenly. The family looks relieved but bruised by the ordeal. The young man looks hollowed out, and yet the community breathes again. Balance, thin and fragile, is restored. You step away, but the weight follows you. Later, as you gather water from the river, you hear two women discussing the ruling. One says it was fair, the other says it was too harsh. A man nearby mutters that if the elders were any softer, nobody would follow rules at all. Conversations cross, collide, swirl like currents in a stream. You realize that justice is not a moment. It's an echo. It lingers. In the afternoon, you see the young man already working beside the wronged family, cutting reeds silently while they avoid eye contact. Their movements are awkward strangers, forced into closeness by tradition. But this is how communities heal. Not by forgetting, but by continuing side by side until the wound stops bleeding. A quirky historical tidbit floats into your thoughts. Some ancient villages required disputing families to share a meal together after the ruling, believing that food softened resentment better than words. You wonder if that will happen tonight. You walk home with a knot in your stomach. You didn't participate in the dispute, yet you feel the weight of it. That's how ancient life works. Everyone carries the decisions made for the group, because the group's survival is built from the sum of all its choices. As the sun sets, you sit by the fire and watch the village move quietly. Children play again, their laughter cautiously returning. Adults speak in lower tones. The air feels tense, but less fragile than this morning. The world hasn't changed, but the people have, even if only slightly. Lying on your mat later, staring at the shadows dancing across the ceiling, you understand the truth. In the brutal reality of ancient civilizations, justice is not clean, or kind, or painless. It is simply necessary, a binding rope that must hold, even when it cuts into the hands that pull it. And tonight that rope held barely, but enough. You said, ChatGPT said, you wake before the sun rises, long before the first voices stir in the settlement. And for a moment you don't know why. There's no storm outside, no messengers, no crying child, no danger scratching at the door, just an unusual stillness inside your chest, a kind of quiet that feels like the world is holding its breath. Then it hits you. Today is the day you leave the settlement. Not permanently, not dramatically, not heroically, but for something far more ordinary and far more ancient. A journey to trade, learn, gather news, and return with whatever the settlement needs to survive the coming season. People don't travel far often, but when they do, the entire community depends on them. Your legs feel heavy as you step outside. A few others have already gathered carrying baskets, ropes, tools, water skins, and charms tied to their belts for protection. You join them, adjusting your own pack, feeling the rough straps against your shoulders. Traveling in ancient life isn't romantic. It's exhausting, dangerous, lonely, but necessary. The elders come to meet you and bless the journey. They place hands on your head, your shoulders, your chest. Their palms are warm, their prayers soft. Children gather behind them, wide-eyed, watching you like you're about to walk into a story. A few adults press small items into your hands: dried fruit, a good luck bead, a tiny carved animal, a piece of cloth scented with herbs. Every gift carries weight. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. Travelers in ancient civilizations were often the only link between distant communities. They brought news, goods, warnings, rumors, cures, and sometimes entire cultural shifts. And the road changed them too, usually in ways their villages could never fully understand. You step beyond the settlement boundary, and the air changes instantly. The world feels bigger out here, harsher, but strangely thrilling. The ground is uneven. The path is barely a path. The wind hits your face harder than it does inside the settlement. Birds watch you from branches like silent spectators. You walk for hours past fields, through brush, up low hills, across cold streams that numb your ankles. Your pack digs into your shoulders. The sun grows hotter. Sweat clings to your back. You hear distant animal calls that make you grip your walking stick a little tighter. By midday, you stop near a cluster of rocks to rest. You chew on a piece of hard bread, feeling each bite travel slowly down your throat. There's no conversation, just breathing, just silence. Ancient travel is a test of body and patience, not comfort. As you continue, you pass abandoned fire pits, footprints from travelers long gone, and a broken pot half buried in dirt, reminders of the countless journeys before yours. Historians still argue whether ancient travel was more significant for trade or cultural exchange, but you can tell just by walking this path. The ancient world was connected in ways people rarely imagine. Later in the afternoon, you reach a ridge overlooking the next valley. A settlement sits below smoke, rising gently from roofs, fields forming neat, curved lines, people moving like tiny dots. It feels strange, looking at another community from above. Part of you wants to run back home. Part of you wants to walk faster. You approach slowly. Strangers look at you with curiosity, caution, calculation. The same way your own people look at unfamiliar travelers. You greet them respectfully, A man steps forward to meet you. You offer small gifts. He studies your face, then smiles just slightly and waves you inside. The next hours unfold in a blur of exchange. Grain for tools, stories for stories, advice for warnings. You learn about a failing harvest to the south, about raiders moving through the hills, about a healer in a far settlement who discovered a new method for treating fever. You watch a potter shaping clay into delicate bowls with techniques you've never seen. You note every detail, knowing your own people will rely on what you bring back. A quirky historical tidbit surfaces. Travelers often became informal diplomats in the ancient world, bridging gaps between communities simply by sharing meals, news, and goodwill. By nightfall, you're exhausted. You lie down in a borrowed space near their communal fire. The smoke curls upward. Your eyes grow heavy, and for the first time today, you realize how far from home you truly are. Your heart aches a soft, steady pull, not from fear, but from the deep knowledge that travel changes you. That when you return, the settlement will feel slightly different, and so will you. You fall asleep, knowing something simple and ancient. In this world, journeys aren't about distance. They're about becoming someone new by the time you return. As the fire crackles softly beside you, its glow fading from bright gold to warm embers, your breath begins to slow. The night deepens around you, stretching out like a wide, quiet blanket, and for the first time all day, you allow your body to fully sink into the earth beneath you. The world that felt large and unpredictable only hours ago now feels softer, gentler, as if it too has decided to lie down and rest. The sounds of distant travelers, the murmur of wind brushing through unseen grass, the low rhythm of your heartbeat, everything begins to blend together into a peaceful hum. The day's weight loosens from your shoulders. Even the ache in your legs seems to soften, dissolving into warmth as your muscles let go. The stars above glow with a steady calm, their cold, ancient light settling over you like quiet reassurance. You no longer feel like a traveller on a long, uncertain road, just a small, resting soul tucked gently beneath the sky. Thoughts drift slower now, softer now. You picture your home, the familiar firelight, the steady breathing of your community settling in for the night. You imagine the path you walk today becoming hazy, fading into the gentle blur of memory. Nothing urgent remains, nothing sharp, only a slow, warm tide rising inside your chest. You inhale deeply, exhale slowly. Your eyelids grow heavier with each breath, your mind easing into that comfortable space between waking and sleep, where stories turn soft and the world turns quiet. Let the night hold you. Let the tiredness settle. Let your thoughts dim like the last embers of the fire beside you. The journey slows. Your breathing softens. Sleep settles over you like a warm, ancient cloak. Sweet dreams.